What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Between Two Heads. My name's Jameson Welbourn. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Addison DeMoura. And today we are joined by my good friend, Collin Palmer of Vessel Life Science. Collin, thank you so much for taking the time, bro.
Thanks for having me, guys. Pleasure. How's it
Appreciate
going?
it, bro. We're super excited to have you on the show. Before we jump into all the cool projects you're currently working on, as we always like to do, we want to dive into the past, learn more about you. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you came up.
Cool. Yeah, so originally I grew up on the East Coast, spent a lot of time in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, outside Philly and in Philly. Then I moved my way up to New York in the late 90s, early 2000s, and was in Brooklyn and those areas outside the city for quite some time, and then eventually bouncing back between New York and in California.
So let's take it back and kind of slow it down a bit. And I know you and I have talked quite a bit, and I've actually had the chance to interview you before. You grew up in Chester County in Pennsylvania, in a very rural area. Can you talk to me a little bit about what young Collin was like and what was interesting? Like, were you attracted to plants at a young age?
Yeah, so I grew up in an agricultural environment, so it was like really suburban, rural, and super rural was really what was around me as a young guy growing up. And the alternative natural lifestyle was a big deal where I grew up. And there was a lot of cut flowers still being grown and a lot of orchards that were growing fruit. So I naturally grew up working on farms and around farms and working in those greenhouses. And there's a horticultural center here in Pennsylvania called Longwood Gardens. And Longwood had a ton of horticulturists that would come from all around the world. And those people would live in the rural areas around, and they happened to just really know how to grow really awesome cannabis. So it was just this world that we had, this microcosm of just horticulture. And then also, because of Andrew Wyeth and the Wyeth world that was around us, we had this art, this like folk art, American folk art vibe happening. So that mixed together was kind of a recipe for this like microcosm and small little nook of cannabis and growing that was happening in the Northeast. It's where, as a young guy, when we talk about skunks and these like roadkill vibes, I remember the smells, but it was a lot of the elders that were growing a lot of that stuff. And by the time we were growing a lot of these varietals, it was more about G13 and bubblegum and AK-47 and things like that were coming from predominantly Holland and a lot of seed banks abroad.
Absolutely. So your introduction to cannabis came at a very young age. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So yeah, totally. I mean, I was, I had a best friend, Luke, and if Luke P, if you're watching, miss you, brother. He lives in Australia. We grew up and went on this journey when we were younger, and his mom gave us space in their basement to grow indoors and really explore outdoors as well on their property. And that kind of spilled over into other properties, and larger patches were grown. And, as we gained access to different seed stock that were given to us at that age, we were just constantly popping it, and all of it would be popped at Mary's place. And
what age was that, Collin?
15 years old, 14, 15 years old.
That's super cool to be able to have that opportunity at 15 years old, to have that ability to have those resources and that space to watch plants grow. I mean, a lot of the people that we've had on the show or that I've interviewed have had stories around that age, but usually they end up with, and then my parents came and ripped the plants out of the ground.
100%.
So,
yeah. In this case,
really
it was
cool.
Yeah, very different for us. It was she was a horticulturist, and she was just really into the fact that we were into it. And I had another friend, Scott. I'll just call him Scott M, who was in a wheelchair, who actually really was the main introduction to the IRC world, like where like Subcool and a lot of these guys were on these back secret channels back in the day, trading seed stock and seeds. He was a part of that too. So I think it's important to call him out, because he was like the connector for me to get into the inner to get access to like any cut essentially.
Do you guys remember what you were growing back then?
Yeah, so at least in the beginning, we were given bag seed from Deadlot, right? And that was the beginning, right? That was the first iteration of things. And then it was AK-47, bubblegum, old Sensi stock, so like Shiva skunks and like super skunk. What was the and then we were given access to a lot of some stuff like we were told from BC. So we were growing things like Big Bud, and things that had just like massive cola structures, but I don't remember things like that being very good. If that,
yeah,
you know what I mean? But it's like, wow, look at the biomass. But those were the varietals like then, like in the early days, like pre-2000, it was really a lot of just things were given to us, for instance, there was this local skunk that was given to us that we would grow, and it was not even called skunk, we'd call it kush, right? And it would just be like, and a lot more general terms were used back then. It wasn't more about the varietal, because we were young, like we didn't know, like we were just learning what indica and sativa and even a hybrid even meant, so we were so young back then. So it wasn't
what year
really
was it?
2000, like 98, 99. That
was like the kush. That's when you guys
like 97, 98, 99. That was like bag seed from tour. Hey, we came back. We were in did the north, the northwest all the way down, into Cali tour, and this is what we brought back, kind of stuff. Or this one guy, Marcus, that used to live in Mary's house at one point, had this jar of seeds, and admittedly Luke and I went in and snagged like probably a couple hundred of those, and we had no idea what that was, but there's some, I distinctly remember that particular batch that we had I wish we were smart enough to save a lot of that stuff, because some of it was just unbelievable when I look back to it. I remember bringing bags up to New York City when my brothers were living up there, and people were like, dude, what is this? So it's amazing what happens when you're young and dumb, like you just don't know. You don't keep mails. You don't,
I always say that if I had a time machine, I would go back and get genetics and not the lottery, because the genetics are the lottery. It's like you could grab all those fucking crazy things you forgot, but maybe one day that'd be cool.
Collin, we talked 100%. A lot. We touched on your first experiences around cultivation, but we didn't really touch on your first interaction with the plant. At what age did that take place? And was it an immediate attraction, or did it take some time to develop that affinity to using cannabis?
No, it was kind of immediate. Cannabis and at least like being touched by the plant, as I often use the term, it was immediate, I think, for me. I grew up in such a way that, I loved skateboarding, I loved music, I loved the arts, and I loved anything that encompassed that. And to me, these things were spiritual tools to get you further into a creative realm. So it looked to me, it was inspiring to learn about that. And partly I think why I got so into just the whole process in general is it's very much like creating anything. It's all process, and it's all, you have these peaks and valleys, but there's reward, right? And there's immediate reward, especially like when you have a clean canvas or you have a clean slate to write a song. These things are built, and you get immediate responses, just like the varietals. You grow them, you're like, okay, this has these really interesting traits, and if you start to pay attention, you can start to blend them, and you can start to create new things. So I think it's just the process. So all of those things were always in the wheelhouse, and something that was interesting to me as a young individual.
So 96, you get onto the BCGA, and form become a pretty big part of your life going forward. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, to me, I've been super curious. I always want to learn things, and I'm obsessive, right? So when I was introduced that you could go online, this thing like the internet, and you could find information that could teach you and have other individuals that were sharing or going through similar experiences, I felt like I found a group of individuals that I could like belong to. number one, and really felt like, Old Timer and Vic High, and even what Rick from Brothers Grimm was doing at the time. Him and his partner, they were really pushing the boundaries at the time as a young guy to me in terms of like American breeding and just exploration in terms of genetics. And Vic with Space Queen and all of those contributions to cannabis. It's kind of what, for those who don't know, that's basically what Subcool's whole catalog is based off of, is Vic High's work. And he's, to me, kind of our North American, or modern, somewhat modern or contemporary version of what Rob or even Dave Watson were doing. So that's, to me, that was kind of the thing that sparked the interest and brought me into a world of like, I feel like I belong, and I have like my people here, and I can ask stupid questions and have them tell me. Like I could probably still go on the BCGA and see some stupid questions like, I think I have like male pollen sacs popping up. What do I do? You know what I mean? Like just this like safe space to ask your peers, like, what do you do? And at that time it was that primitive for me because I was learning, I was learning what was possible. And then seeing them post about their, that was the first place I learned about how to basically create a hybrid, and there today, those posts still exist. Like you can go back and look at what Vic was trying to teach everyone, is that you can breed too, and you can pay attention to traits, and these are the things that you could do and the steps you could take to do it. So that was, to me, that was the place for it. And then that's where it snowballed into these people not just becoming handles, but actual pen pals, right? And then from being pen pals, we were now exchanging information and ideologies, and then eventually genetics. And then those genetics were being shared back and forth. And I was encouraged to make new things. So, and that's where, there's Spice of Life seeds. I mean, look at what that era of, that's another, it just popped in my brain. Like that's Addison, that's another whole subset of genetics that was around for me at the time. And then Half Gooey came into the mix, and we got that cut, and that was, the Gooey breeders' work was in there. You know what I mean? So it was all that stuff. Like Blockhead was an awesome varietal. For those that don't know, Sweet Tooth 3, Sweet Tooth 1 was cool, but then Sweet Tooth 3 came out, and that was like this like chunky. I remember it was like really mold resistant. It was great for outdoor. Really good for wet environments, and very resistant to mold and mildew. So we really gravitated toward things that really worked in those environments at the time, because you have to remember, we were going indoor, but we didn't have environmental controls. We had most of the time the rooms were too hot. We didn't have sophisticated nutrients, so it was hard. It was not easy. So if we could grow outside, and when we did grow outside, that's where we were mending soils and using, chicken manure and going to the local farms around us and getting and foraging essentially what we could to create our own soil blend, top dressings essentially, and then mixing those in. But we grew predominantly, in native soil for the most part. It was just too difficult to move soil in at the time.
And talk a little bit about what that was like in the late 90s, early 2000s, outdoor growing in the Northeast US. Like I would imagine that your cultivar selection would have been just absolutely crucial.
100%. But at the time, you have to remember, we're still young and we're trying things. So like, of course, I've put Neville's Haze out here in the Pacific, or the Northeast, and every one of those phenos I grew, and I'll never forget how purple and how long, just like everything was dead, and these towering, huge sativas were just like, limping over, still alive somehow, until like the end of like mid-November and, end of November, you know what I mean? So it's, yes, I think it's really important. And as I got through those seasons of learning, you started to select towards things that, okay, so that's molded out. This is good to grow because it finishes in 8 weeks. this is not great to grow because it finishes in 14, you know, like, and you just start narrowing things down. And at the time, you don't have like this immediacy we have right now. We don't have this back then. You barely even have your buddy to even ask. And when you do, you're just like, I don't know, man, like, just keep going.
I mean, the clandestine nature that you would have had to operate under at that time in, you know, some of these states would have made it very difficult to have any kind of, you know, information exchange. I would imagine.
100%. And that's why the forums were so key. Like, I can't stress this enough to everyone. The only reason that ChemDog and Sour and all this stuff lives on is because of these Silk Road networks, as I call it, that were sharing genetics at the time. And there just wasn't enough of us willing to come out of the woodwork at the time in person to be able to even exchange these things, let alone talk about it. You know what I mean?
One of the other things too that I remember at that time when everything was so secretive, the other interaction that you had was when you sold the product or when you got rid of the product and where the product went. And that was more, when in our circles, that was more what dictated what was being grown. You know, that's more like you were throwing it up against the wall to see what would go well and what would kind of show up. And then the market would tell you how well they liked it. And if it was good, back then, even my friends, they didn't keep a cut. It was just like you got more seeds and you put them back out and you kind of did a selection. But no, that's my question is when at the same time, when did the horticulture and the production and growing kind of meet your customer base? Did you start selling it to other people? Were you guys just smoking it yourself? What was kind of the evolution of that?
Yeah, so the evolution of it was really we were making, basically we were growing lots of different varietals and we had a lot of material, right? The end goal was not to immediately move that stuff around, right? We had older siblings that came to us and were like, yo, look, this is really good, right? And you need to understand that you can actually move this and we're going to help you do that. So we focused on what we wanted to, which was cultivation, and those individuals focused on those things, right? And that's how it always moved. And I think that's also what saved me over the years from being another number and another statistic, right? Because there was so many layers between that and me that it just, by the time that happened, it was already done. Like the story was written, right? Yeah. They got what they wanted, they needed, right? So could it be juicier? I'm sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how it started. And then as we move forward, we get to things like New York. In New York, that's where the delivery service and sophistication on the delivery service end starts to kind of pick up the slack and changes. And that's where it becomes more organized.
Before we touch on New York, I want to still take it back a little bit and talk about, you know, I know in 1999, things started scaling up a little bit for you, but 99 was also a very busy and relevant year for you because you actually met Marcus Bubbleman Richardson that year.
Yeah, 100%.
And that story you shared with me is a very cool story. You actually connected with him in Amsterdam. Is that correct?
No. So we met in person. So it's even a more interesting story. So Marcus and I met as young guys. Like we were teenage, probably. Yeah, he was probably just turning 20, and I was still a teenager. And he was on the forums, and I'd seen him post about hash, and he was like the only guy at the time that I really knew of that was really on the same wavelength and thinking about the same thing. So we had a mutual friend that I believe linked us up, and I met him on the forums first, and he knew me as my handle for literally, guys, like probably 18 years, like straight up, like didn't even know my name. So I now remember this was the first point you met Marcus. So you met Marcus online in 99. 100%. This is like love stories. You know what I mean? This is like love
and
letters
you actually
online.
and you you had mutual friends. You had Marble
So
Slinger.
Marble Slinger in Philly was a guy that was in the scene, right? And you know, when you're in the scene, you kind of know people, and you know, he had met Marcus on tour, on Fish Tour, I think in the mid '90s or something like that. And so we had this like mutual friend, and I spent time between Vermont and Pennsylvania and PA at the time. So
Yes.
you know, I was around the whole Fish thing for a long time, and that was a big part of my life for a little while. So you know, so him and I just became super tight, you know, just sharing information and for the love of it, right? And online, and then we got on these like chats, like we got on this thing called like True Stoners Chat, and it was like Miss Jill was on there before her and Subcool were even a thing, and Sunshine and Kaka and all these like Plural Mongoose, all these cats, man, all of them were there.
So before you share, sorry to interrupt, Collin, but before you share your story about your actual first in-person meeting with Marcus, I want to ask you some more questions about, you know, your story as you got set up in New York and PA. So I know in 2000 or 2001, you mentioned to me that you're washing up to half your crop.
100%. Yeah.
I think that's something really worth talking about, because I don't think
100%.
that a lot of people were washing half their crop. And I mean, and you're talking about like the colas. And so I'd love you to touch on that and maybe explain that a little more and why you were doing that.
Yeah. So, all right. So the reason that I would wash so much of my materials, number one, because I wanted to do that, because I wanted to have more of it, to move more of it around and have more people have access to great hash. And that was the goal behind doing that. And I made a decision then that because I loved it so much, I wanted other people to love it too. And that's another reason where I think Marcus and I really connected, is like, I kind of stopped really smoking a lot of flower even that early. And I think he did too. And he was kind of like one of the bigger influences for me at the time. He's like, you should just smoke melt, you know? And I think Marcus to me was like, just like a really good buddy that I could like really lean on as like a homie that I just didn't know anybody else, man, to be honest. I really didn't, that was as into hash as he was. So that's where our bromance kind of started, you know, like he's and then he's also just a great guy, but we also, I just think it's important to connect, is like, we love music. Like he's a music head, like he loves music. So like we talk about like Bill Laswell and like, you know, Miles Davis and Fish and the Dead and like all this stuff that we, you know, Coltrane, like he likes music, you know, and then he likes reggae and he knows his shit, like he knows his stuff.
His memory is incredible.
Incredible.
Marcus has the most incredible memories I've ever met, for sure.
So anyway, so that's how, you know, we were introduced, and you know, again, this is like, it's like kind of like street basketball. The ball don't lie, and you know, you know, you see each other. You know, a game sees game. So that's kind of for me. You know, yeah, that's
absolutely,
the
man.
way it
So
is, you know.
Let me ask you this. So during this time, you're collecting genetics, you're scaling up as far as your size, both indoor and outdoor. What were some of the cultivars that you were growing at that time? Like, I know you had Neville's Haze, I know you had the Romulan. What were some of the other ones that were popular during that time?
Yeah, so so I don't know if anyone remembers the Northern California Growers Association, the NCGA, but those cats had the Blue Widow, and that was gifted to me through this gentleman on Overgrow IMGCA. He sent me that Calio, Blackberry Kush. That was another one that came through. Is when Blackberry came through, I don't know if anyone remembers. We all thought it was fake, but the Blackberry Kush was another one that came through. There was a lot of Super Silver Haze at the time that we were running. A lot of Mango Haze was another one that was like often sold in New York as Piff. But
is it true that you got this skunk cut at a skate park in New York?
Yes. Oh yeah. And then we got so we used to spend a lot of time down at FDR in Philly and skating a lot. At the end of the day, we'd drive into the city sometimes. and we'd stop there and we'd just spend time skating, and we became really tight with like Hippie West and a couple other the cats that were down at FDR. If any cats are listening, big love. They had this one cut that they loved. They were calling it Skunk Six, and I remember taking a flat from them and not realizing that it had 2 spotted mites on it, and we ended up growing. We amended it, but we put it outside, and it was really nice stuff. We ended up keeping that for a few years, but I don't know where that cut is today, and I'm not quite sure what you would call it today, to be honest. But that was another one that we ran quite a bit. That was it was a good 4 years of that. AK-47 was a big one for us. That was just an easy staple that everyone wanted. And then of course, eventually, running sour. But the older heads that were running sour before us, and I mean like older, 65-year-old individuals. It was a passing of the torch, at the time. So there were other individuals that got access of it too, and there were quite a few individuals that were running it. So yeah, but that was kind of the deal for us, in the early 2000s. It was like Bog Sub was early days of Sub before even his TGA stuff. Lots of stuff from KC Brains and all those cats over in Europe, man. Like all the usual suspects, man. You go through it, like all of what Simon was doing with Serious Seeds, and then Sensi, Ben Donker's stuff, and then Adam from TH Seeds and his partner Doug. They were doing some cool stuff at the time. So we were running a lot of that stuff. MK Ultra was the deal.
What's so special about the NCGA Widow? I've heard you talk about it multiple times.
If you're a Haze fan and you like that sweet, like lasting gobstoppers, like just lingering taste sweetness on your tongue, that one, just no matter how you did it, it just always tasted so amazing. And I've always been attracted to flavor. If I really look back, it's why, like, when I first got the A77 Calio cut, I was like, oh my God, I did not realize that we could do this with these plants. Like, dude, this is like an orange, I'm a teenager, you know what I mean? So, it's quite unbelievable when you see these variations of this plant that you assume as a young individual that there's only one way this can come, right? And it does this one thing, and it's amazing when that is flipped upside down. So
absolutely. So as you're scaling up your cultivation footprint between like 03 and 05, like, do you remember that to be a stressful time in your life, or do you remember that to be
100%?
Okay.
I was 100%. I was bouncing from place to place, just trying to like keep things like going. Like, honestly, like there were times like making like car battery pumps, like to go into like riverbeds that are running water all the way up the side of, you know what I mean? So you're going out in the middle of the night in thick briars and just getting Lyme's disease. And I mean, I've had Lyme's disease like 4 times, I'm not kidding. So so like you're poison ivy, I mean, God, the list goes on. I mean, you had to make these things so inaccessible that we made tunnels and went deep on trying to protect ourselves in thick briars. And in the Northeast, that's what you got. You have these thick briar bushes you can take advantage of that are these European bushes that aren't even native. They're just not even supposed to be there. But yeah, so for me, scaling up was super stressful. And then it was for me, it was more about like, I've got to get all these varietals out and I want to explore all this stuff. And I was hell bent on doing it, and I didn't see any other way, to be honest. I don't remember ever thinking like I shouldn't do this. It wasn't like that. It was like, like this takes a lot of time, and all I'm doing is it's like 5 a.m, and I've been out here for 9 hours. You know what I mean? So like it was stuff like that, like sweat, you know, like dripping sweat, you know. So that you have to understand at the time, these are totally different times. Like you're not even visiting your patch every other day. Like it's not even like that. This is like every other week. And
Super,
you know,
super guerrilla.
Yeah, we used to dig trenches and fill them with water, you know, and seriously, and that was like kind of our makeshift irrigation for the area. We used to like strategically put the plant, you know, put them around, you know. So
were you doing much indoor cultivation at that time, or was it primarily outdoor?
So the indoor that we were doing was very limited. So we would do like, you know, as much as we could until like 2005. That I think that's when things started to really change, because it was, yeah. I mean, we did some, you know, but it's like you're still talking about like, you know, what, 10, 12 lights, you know, like you're not, it's not, not what you could do when you put things outside, or if you were like, you know, eventually we're, you know, making things camouflage, and you could pull tarps, you could do, you know, you could do your version of that. Because in the East Coast, you have, if you start in February, you could get a crop down in June, and then from June to September or October, you can get another one down. So it's very similar, but you have to be, to your point earlier in the conversation, it's about your varietals, and it's about where you specifically geographically where you are, because there are actual microclimates in New York State and Pennsylvania and the Commonwealth.
What were you feeding at the time?
Dude, everything and anything, to be honest. There were times like yeah, totally. Like you GH all day long in the early days. You know, the early days, we were even using Miracle Grow in like the 90s, man. Same as like Mel Frank and all those guys, man. It's all there was. If we have to remind ourselves, there just wasn't. It's just all there was. So,
Collin, of all the varietals that you mentioned, the Romulan, the Widow, the NL5, the Crippy, which one of those was the easiest in your memory to grow outdoors in that area?
Interesting question. The easiest one to grow. I think the easiest things to grow, from my recollection, were the actual G13 Fig Widow. That was the easiest. It's funny, when you said Widow, I didn't even think of the G13 Fig Widow. The G13 Fig Widow was the easiest varietal I've grown, and the best return and the best bag appeal that I'd seen out of that stuff at that time. That Fig Widow, something about it had this sweetness to the G13 line. And I actually got that from Dankmaster on Overgrow. Dankmaster, I don't know where he is. And if you are out there, dude, please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. That guy had some of the best genetics on the forums for a long time. He had just had a knack for selection. Like he gave me the AK-47 cut that I ran. I mean, it was just super special. That some of those individuals for sure were really talented.
I want to talk about the sour diesel. You touched on it a little bit before. I want to talk as much or as little about it as you want, but as somebody who was there, I think that your stories carry a little bit more water than others, and so I'd love to get your opinion on how many there are, and you know where its origin came from.
Yeah. All right. So let's get one thing out of the way. When Summa from Summa Seeds is a fantastic individual, good breeder, has his own awesome lines. His diesel has nothing to do with the North American diesel that we know today, the sour diesel that we know today. Nor does it have anything to do with the East Coast sour diesel that we know today. So in my personal belief, there's only real two cuts that have emerged, and really there was only one. There was only one cut I ever really ran of sour, and it's the original diesel, the original sour diesel. That's all it's called, plain and simple. New York City sour diesel. That's Summa Seeds trying to market himself to be more desirable at the time in the 2000s when that was really a big thing.
Mm-hmm. totally
So-
different plants. Like
So
they're
totally different. Yeah, like the P1 stock used in that has nothing to do genomically with.
they
the
grow
sour
completely different. They
100%.
finish completely different. They smell different. They taste different. One's citrus, the other one's straight fucking roadkill skunk.
100%.
You know, dirt. It's just so funny, and you're the first person I've ever heard that actually explained that correctly, because Soma did want to capture the popularity of the diesel name, and then it was New York City diesel, and then everyone
100%.
sort of was like, oh well, sour diesel's the most desired strain in New York, and the name New York, and so he was really brilliant at the time. But no, it's great that you explain it that way, because they are two very different fucking plants and very different things. But go ahead, sorry.
No doubt. Yeah, no, you're spot on. So, brilliant marketing, really smart of him to do that. More power to Soma and what he's up to. I think the original diesel is the one. It's the sour diesel that was all around when you were young and what you remember it to be in whatever.
Sorry to interrupt, Collin. The older heads that you referenced earlier that we were talking about, were they affiliated with any certain group of individuals that we would know? Like where did the origin of the cut, as far as you know it back, where does it go?
So yeah, so it was grown in Staten Island. There's a lighting and grip house called Goblin Lighting and Grip that was started in 1968 by Joseph Balestic, who was my uncle. Joe has been someone that's been a part of that scene forever. And him and his crew ran the sour, and everyone else beside that got access to it through those crews, and the rest is history. I mean, being associated with it is fine, but the originator of it has yet to be really brought to light, and there's a reason for that. And I don't want everyone to feel like I'm trying to say that everyone's reality is not real, but yeah, like AJ was a part of it, and so was what Pinsky was doing and all those guys. Our crews never really connected. Like they're different. Like it's a big city, man. Like we were in Brooklyn. If you were not in Dumbo or in Bed-Stuy or Clinton Hill, the Lower East Side's far away, dude. Williamsburg to the Lower East Side's far away. Sunnyside's super far. Being in the Bronx is like being in another state. You know what I mean? So you have to understand that when that phenomenon happened, a lot of people got access to things at the same time, and everyone proliferated. It's undeniably, at the time, we didn't have contemporary varietals like we have today, and I think that's important to call out. So keeping cuts like this was so important when you found an anomaly like this. So yeah, that's to me, the original diesel came from Staten Island. The East Coast sour diesel is an OG Kush cross to the original sour, and that's it. Those are the two. In my world, in my reality, that's what exists. And
that's awesome, man. I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier with the forums, and I think that you went from BCGA to Laughing Moon, and then from Laughing Moon, I think it was quickly to Overgrow. And in 2000, and there might have been one in between, but in 2006, Overgrow was shut down. Can you talk a little bit about the ramifications that had for you as well as the community in general?
Yeah. So back in the day, we used to talk about like pre and post 9/11 trading seeds and cuts, right? There was like a totally big difference where like Hush Mail came about, Opera Mail, all these things that we used to use. All of it came about because of that time. And before that, it was like the gravy train. It was just like anything went, kind of like how it feels right now, which is odd to say. So when 2000s, look, let's just say this: when that happened, it was lights out for everyone that I knew. It was immediate lights out, because that server, when the RMCP, am I saying that correctly?
RCMP.
RCMP. When they get a hold of those things and all of those files and all of our our DMs, as we called them at the time, or we called them PMs at the time, which is funny to even say because now we call them DMs. Everyone had access to that. So addresses, PO boxes. I mean, you couldn't have imagined how stupid we were when we were young. I mean, we didn't understand technology. We didn't understand that everything and anything that we were saying was recorded just like it is right now, right? So all of that was open. So people like Bog and Sub and myself and I mean, a whole slew of individuals, whether they were from Europe or not, or the United States or wherever, everyone like closed down, and I couldn't even get a hold of Bog for a long time. He was in I guess it's okay to say this now, he was in Montana at the time, and then he finally moved to California during that time because of all of it. And that's because, like, you have to understand, Gypsy ran Seed Bay, all of those all of that was open. It was just it cracked an egg and it was just like frying, you know. So everyone was really, really, really on their toes, and including myself and others. We love this plant. It was like our community had just been infiltrated, you know, because of Heaven's Stairway getting completely dismantled. And I have to say, like, Scoosh, like, come on, man, like, why did you do? Why? You didn't need to do what you did, man. Like, you were. I was so about Overgrow that I would pass out flyers at festivals of Overgrow. Like, swear to God, I would print these things out and have a stack and roll around with my girlfriend, handing out flour and hash, just being like, Overgrow, get on it, get involved, overgrow the world, you know, like, it's just, I was so about it, right? But then when that happened, it was like a balloon popped. It was like, pop, boom, and it all went away, which, you know, I made a handle on ICMag, but I never really used it, and I didn't really trust it. And from then on out, it just felt like everyone dispersed. Like, Kaka, if you're listening, you're out there, more power to you, and you're still doing your thing. And if you don't know who Kaka is, he's an incredible grower, and someone was there as well. But yeah, so it was, that's what, there was a paradigm shift during that time. And I think a lot of us fell off. Like, I didn't even know who, you know, a lot of these younger hash makers were at the time that were starting to come in at that time, because I was so concerned that it was just, I was, you know, one knock away from, you know, never again. So it was, yeah. So that was really,
so what did that do for you? What did that do for you as far as your focus, like from 2006 to 2008, you know, the next 2 years, what was Collin focused on?
That's when I started to really shift into like music full time. That's when I was like, all right, I got to start, like, instead of just like playing shows every time someone asked me and to like join in on a session, I'm going to go in and start developing myself as an artist, and I want to start really going for it. So that's where I started working on a record, and through doing that, that's where I met like Hunter and Zach from Soundtribe Sector 9, and you know, I met you know, Travis Stewart, Machine Drum, and I became really close, and Praveen Sharma, who started Percussion Lab, if anyone remembers that, in New York. We threw parties, and we were, you know, focusing on making art, you know, and collaborating with one another as young artists and trying to figure out who we were.
And during that, were you still holding on to all the genetics that you'd been working
100%.
with?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So now we still make a ton of hash, and we still functioned. It just wasn't as bonkers. It wasn't as like, I'm not going to travel to a different state today to check on, you know, things and spend like 4 days there and come back.
Yeah. So at what point did Vessel Life Science emerge or come about?
So around 2009, Vessel Life Science was kind of an ideology that we were vessels for this plant, and we're more of a carrier than we are the vessel. And I wanted to create something that embodied that ideology, that we're here as temporary creatures to really pass the torch and to learn while we're here on this timeline that we're in.
Was this the formation of Vessel did you have to admit to yourself that cannabis might take a front seat in your career at that point, or was this just I need to have something to call this I do on the side while I pursue my main career of music?
Well, I mean, actually, you know what was a real big turning point for me is when I was on tour and I just got off tour with New Villager, which is a band that I collaborate with, and I mean, it's more of an art project than anything. But I met Marcus when I was in Amsterdam in 2010 in person for the first time, and when I met him, we were like just walking around together, and we just had this moment where he's like, you don't know where you are right now, do you? And I was like, no. He goes, I fucking love that. And in that moment, I was like, I'm like, man, that was really interesting. You just called out that I don't actually know where I'm at right now. And but I'm surrounded by all the things I love right now. Music, cannabis.
You got to rewind it, Collin, and tell him how you met Marcus. You got to tell him the story because it's an incredible story.
Well, I mean, I met him through the forums, and we became
with the happenstance of
when I was walking. Yeah, so
that's
like,
an incredible
I'm
story.
On tour, and I'm like walking in Amsterdam, and I like see Hoodlum, and I'm like, wow, Hoodlum, cool, man, like hemp jackets, sick. And I walk in the store and I see bubble bags on the wall, and I'm like, man, fucking bubble bags, sick. I wonder what Marcus is up to. And I think it was Doug. Doug was like, you know Marcus? And he like proceeds to call him on his phone and literally passes me the phone, maybe to test me. I don't know. Like, and I'm like, hey, Marcus, it's Lemon Cake. And he was like, no way, dude. I'm at this address. Please come link with me right now. I hung up the phone, went right to that address. I think it was this, I'm sure he could tell a better story of what hotel it was, but I can't remember. Went through all these weird hallways and up these weird little back stairwell. And there Marcus is. He's like, what's up, dude? And we have an incredible night together and talk about everything that we love to talk about. And he introduces me to Flav. I think Great Gardner was there. Summa was there from Summa Seeds. A couple other people. I can't remember exactly all the faces, but
and so was
really
it then? Was it then, or was it the following day?
No, we were actually walking that night. It was like super late, and I had no idea where I was walking because it's a circle, right? Like Amsterdam's a big circle, so we're just walking, and like we're super lit, and he's like, "You have no idea where you are right now." And like, I look at him like, "You're totally right in so many ways, man. I got to get my shit together." So yeah, at that time, I came back to the US after that tour and decided that I want to really refocus what all this means to me and what I want to do with it as someone it's just been my life. This has been something I've been doing since I was a young kid. This is just like art to me. It's like music, it has followed me through my whole life, and it's hard to discount that. So it was really great to meet him at that time. Is just what I needed at that time in my life, to be honest, was that inspiration of like, look, man, I'm doing this. And he was like telling me about all the things he was doing and getting into. And I just was super inspired by it. So, yeah. And then I came back to the States and I started really focusing on data collection. And that's when it started to really click for me that if I wanted to be great at this particular process, I needed to learn more about the economic side of it and the yield and why things are working or not working. And I made this huge spreadsheet, man, and I went crazy and I started really plugging in all these different attributes of it, like from environment, temperatures to water temperatures to different types of ice, sizes and how long it took to melt that stuff down. And I just went really into process and just trying to get into it. And it's like music to me. It's process. It's probably, I always think about this. I'm like, why am I so obsessed with this? It's the same thing. These are just process. It's all of it's process. There's that immediate reward and iteration you can do on it,
And at this point you're washing fresh frozen.
In 2010. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. 100%. Yeah,
that's awesome. And so you're
air dry. Here's one thing I want to talk about is like you have to understand at the time we didn't freeze dryers weren't even a twinkle in our eyes. Like, not even, man. Like, we were talking about microplaning and which refrigerator to buy and which one had better RH control and what surface area you use to dry on, you know, and it just was a very different talk. Like, you're not talking about freeze drying and phase changes and millitor ranges. You're just not. You're you know. So we had to go through all of this stuff, you know, and honestly, it was really. I'm thankful for going through air drying all the way to where we're at now, because it informs the way I look at how I process today. And I recommend everyone to microplane and to air dry and try microplaning, try not microplaning, see the difference, see why it's better or worse, and come to your own conclusions and look deeper into yourself as to why your process could be improved. You know, but all of those things are. It was hard to make good hash, man. It was really hard. I just want to preference that.
Sorry, go ahead, Addison.
How do you feel now? With that being the statement that it's hard to make good hash, things have kind of, you know, moved forward and progressed. How do you feel about the hash breeder coming in to the picture and kind of adding to the story now? Because we do have the hash breeder coming in, and I think even, I mean, how many years now would you say? I'd say, I mean, Sam has always been a hash breeder, and that kind of, I think, started it a long, long time ago. And there's always been people breeding, you know, but the flower market was so big and so dominant that it was always breeding for flower first, and then, you know, bag appeal flower first, and then going into hash production if it produced, right? Like you mentioned earlier, Afgoo, still to this day, one of the most insane hash producing strains I've ever seen in my entire
100%.
life. Like an orchestra of hash comes from that plant of sizes that's just unfucking fuckwithable in every way. If you like the terp and talk about a narcotic high, but anyway, and I think that might be the beginning of it, right? Like if you look at Afgoo and what guys were kind of, I mean, I don't know anybody that took Afgoo back then and said, oh fuck, I'm going to cross Afgoo into this, and I'm going to make the greatest hash strain. I wish I had Afgoo now, but with the hash breeder coming in, what is that kind of, how does that now change things? And what was the first of that you saw?
You know, honestly, I think it's super recent for me to hear people talking that I'm here for hash. I mean, honestly, guys, like nobody wanted our hash. And even 2010, it was like, cool, man, what else you got?
Even worse, yeah.
I mean, I'm serious. You have a slab, right? I mean,
there was a dark period for water hash that
100%,
we must talk about.
Lived right through it.
There was a dark period. It was a dark time when it was when BHO was hammering, and it was like mercy, fucking gold slabs, like popping bottles. There was a dark period for fucking water hash. So I remember.
Yeah, I think it's really recent, but I would say to kind of complement what you're saying, Sam was the original hash breeder, and Skunk One may be the original hash forward plant, besides, you know, these Afghanis that produce well. But honestly, a lot of those Afghanis didn't produce great resin. It was too larvae, right? You got it. So we have to remind ourselves that I could hear someone and being like, yeah, that's not true, man. Like there were so many other Afghans. Well, show me one Afghan from that time period that produced the terp profile that you see today. Because I can't remember one. I mean, they're usually bland and very, very, very different. You know, like they just didn't have a lot of, you know, caryophyllene in it, to be honest. Like it's just. Yeah.
I think the terp profiles kind of came from the polyhybridization, like the major cross of everything kind of getting, and then the terp profiles sort of banged out because everything was so dominant. Like think of it, skunk was dominant skunk.
100%.
You know, what was that? Remember before Afgooey, there was a strain, I think it was called like Galactica, maybe?
That was like I think that's Subcool Galactica. I think that's just so cool.
But it was a heavy indica.
Yeah.
It was like and I use the word fucking indica. Don't fucking get nuts. But you know, it was a heavy.
What do you mean? Is that a true broadleaf?
Is it an up high or is it a down high? Like, shut the fuck up. I remember when being high was like, I'm fucking high. Like, and then everyone like starts to put a color to high, and you're like, get the fuck out of here. How about, you know, I can't function high. But no, back then, when everything was so itself, it wasn't this like, you know, Sour D was almost the first one that I kind of experienced the two flavors, the inhale flavor and then the exhale flavor, and you were like, oh shit, there's depth to this shit, you know, and you kind of got into it. But yeah, I don't want to hijack the conversation. I love it.
I think it's interesting.
So you're to me, I think there was a couple of varietals like that. That's what like the Blue Widow was for me. That's like for me, that was that plant just was this crazy. I mean, I've tried high and low to find it. I've even asked people like Matt Riot, who still I believe knows NCGA, and he's like, it's gone, man. Like no one's gone. Yeah.
So, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to finish with, I agree with you where a lot of these polyhybrids were the first of their kind to really, in North America, to really bring this flavor profile that was not terpenoline dominant, because my elders were terpenoline fanatics. They weren't looking for the same things that we are looking for today. So therefore, because there wasn't enough of us growing enough of these things like there are today, it was so bottlenecked even then. Like I always say, like, yeah, we can talk like we're bottlenecking and everything to GSC, but it was already bottlenecked. So
no, many times. I mean,
many times.
There was no.
You look at what Neville was doing. That's bottlenecked too. It's not like he was keeping large populations. I mean,
it's genetics. It's gonna hit a fucking dead end, and you got to bump off of that. Like, think of it this way: when was the first that we ever all collectively saw the banana ester? You know, with that banana,
that was
banana smell and flavor.
Overgrowth to me, man. Yeah. I remember that thread when it came up. I was like, whoa, gotta get that. You know, like, you know, so again, that's why I always preference how important the forums have been. All of these things we are riding on today have been held on to through those networks and those individuals that were on those networks. And we're all quite young, if I'm honest, man. You know, it's the reality of it.
Brotherhood is what
it's insane.
I can't
even.
Just
I look back.
Crazy brotherhood, like
100%. And you know, like people have fall offs and you know, over
get jobs.
Yeah.
Do weird shit.
Get exactly. Grow up. Get older. Right. Don't get old.
Leave Neverland.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the thing though. We're still in it. You know, we've 100%. We've created our own reality, I think, which is I'm really proud of actually.
Once the top blows off and we get to be like Jameson and we have national, this shit is gonna be fucking insane, man. Like Marcus and I have the greatest conversations about national and what is possible and have had some great combos. So that's like I think when you look at what's possible back then, because everything was so tight knit, and you know, you're talking about the forums, but there's groups of guys that weren't even on forums. They were just dudes that grew, that might have known each other from the grow shop, that kind of got close enough, like deer in the woods, to sniff each other and make a pack. And then it was like nothing left that fucking crew and shit, you know, and think of how many of those were, and everything was bred for bag appeal. And so when you're right, when you started to see these polyhybrids, or more, even more of like American breeding, where guys were getting shit from Europe, it was coming back. Now it was starting to get crossed in different ways, and things just started popping up, and it led to like so much in that terp profile that, you know, when we started analyzing cannabis and looking at terp profiles and seeing how broad they were, we really didn't know what the fuck we were doing, because they were only from that region or only from that one place. We weren't looking at like all the other different shit in all the other places. And I still think to this day, we still haven't even captured like a full real, like a library or lineage of regions of what came from what regions in the United States and where those are traced back to. And I think we'll get to that at some point. I think Vessel will probably have something to fucking do with it because you guys are so into that type of thing. And you know, so.
Yeah,
but yeah, no.
That's why we worked with Phyllis early on. We wanted to believe. That's where I met Kevin Dodry and Jeremy Plum and, you know, Terp Hogs, all these cats. We all were brought into the one room together for the first time. And I can't tell you how exciting that was to feel that brotherhood again for the first time in a really long time. I was like, wow, this makes me feel like electric right now. Like, this is like, we all have a vision here and we're all circling around these really neat ideas as to how to make a better future for ourselves. And of course, you know, it turned into what it did, but you know, now I'm working with Medicinal Genomics and Kevin McKernan, and I think Kevin and his team are doing some really interesting things. And
so you know, before we touch on all that, Collin, I'm gonna pull it back like I always do.
All right, pull it back.
I'm the ref, man. That's my role. So 2010, you come back from Amsterdam, filled with passion. You now are growing completely for whole plant, fresh frozen.
100%.
2011, you're recording all your data. 2011, you make your first appearance on Hash Church.
Maybe later than that. You'd have to go and ask Marcus. Like, it was with Jody, Emery, and Marcus, and I'm just in the background, dude. Like, I'm not even sure.
But the reason that
I was very, very stressed.
The reason that I bring up your first appearance on Hash Church is that within a few years, you're in a business partnership with Marcus Richardson and Tony Vizura.
100%.
So why can you share with the listeners how important, what Hash Church meant to you and how important it was in your progression at that time?
Well, so you know that feeling I just exchanged with you guys about being in the room with everyone that's like, they all have a glow and everyone has energy. I think that's what Hash Church was for the community. I think for me, and what Marcus was attempting to do was trying to share the things that I know him and I, coming up in all of this, had shared with other like-minded individuals on the forums. And you wanted to, at least this is my take of it. Sorry if it's not Marcus, but I felt like he was trying to build a community, and he did, that was broader than just a forum, and really put a face with the name for the first time. That it wasn't just like Obi-Wan or Lemon Cake or BC Bubbleman, and you didn't really know who these individuals were. And on top of that, these individuals really know their stuff, and they really have a lot to share with the community because they've been through a lot, the same way that all of us have been through it. So I think he did a great job and has done a great job of bringing like-minded individuals together to share in an open forum that isn't, you know, scripted or selling ad space. It's really organic, and it's about just that. It's about being organic and having an organic conversation. So I think it really pushed everyone forward, and it's done a lot for not only myself but also the community. And I know it's done a lot for Tony and you know, so many people. I mean, I can't, you know, Alec at SC Labs. I mean, Dr. Mark. You know, it just gives us an open forum to be able to talk and share and exchange ideas at a high level that I just don't get enough chances to do that, to be honest. I kind of miss doing it every Sunday, but we're all so busy, man. I totally get it. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's the importance of it all to me, was the ability to share information on a weekly basis that was kind of focused, but kind of loose at the same time. It had this really organic feel to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's always good times in there.
Can you talk a little bit more about the attempted business that formed between yourself, Tony, and Marcus in PA, and what you guys were attempting to do there?
Yeah, so I don't know if it was really failed. It just, when you...
I didn't mean to say failed.
It's just we never really got it off the ground because we couldn't obtain a license. And I don't look at not getting a license as a failure. I think it is it's a time clock. It's a matter of time. We will be in these states. Just mark my words. We will be in every state you are in right now. It's just time, man. I have no doubt. No doubt. That is not a worry of mine.
What were you guys attempting?
This is not even a marathon. It's a triathlon.
For
so,
sure.
You know what I mean? So I think it's important that just because you're not there now, and this is something for people who are trying to get in, you have so much time, and it doesn't matter how much time from point A to point B it takes. As long as you keep your vision true and your ethics there, you're going to do just fine. Just keep going.
Yeah. Focus on what's on your plate in front of you.
100%.
Get really fucking good at that. And, you know, I mean, think of the networking that it takes to really be, to really, you know, it takes having a skill level and an understanding of certain things that come from the years and years and years and years before it was legal, before it was recreational, that had to be put in to build this level of understanding and skill. And to survive all that, to then know that, understand business acumen, turn it on, create businesses and companies, run those companies, and then get an education from that side, because we're not from that world.
100%.
Like you said, man, there's something about being in a room of heads, of guys that have done this, that are mavericks, that have done the same shit, and you have the same kind of stories, and there's a level of like oneness that you feel because everyone's earned the right to be there, and then has that expertise, has that understanding. So now when you evolve to the point we're at now as an industry, and in the US, we're all in our own states, but we have gigs in other states and we're able to do stuff. Once those walls fall and we can all do our shit, you'll really get to see what's best at that point too, because, you know, right now you see it. If you're great in one place, you're not so great in another. And it's because the market in Oklahoma is different from the market in Denver, is different from the market in California. They may all want the same stuff, but the ability to produce, you know, there's these challenges, but I think Vessel and what you guys are and how you guys have kind of come together, you've shown, man, that you definitely have the calm and the love for things and the willingness to kind of learn and geek out and sort of like ADHD the fuck out of, you know, and OCD it all up. And it's like, but a bunch of us all have that same shit in common. I think that's why we all get along now, that we like,
100%.
and a bunch of us are such good friends that it's funny that like we all get along and it's either glass industry, extraction industry, production component, you know, different things that are all kind of there, but make up like these group of mavericks, and Tony, and, you know, different ones, and everyone has their opinion about everybody. And, you know, business goes good, business goes bad. A lot of guys are really great at making hash, but not so great at business. And they allow somebody else to make business decisions, which then reflect on them. And that kind of shit happens. And it's like, you know, I see you all over the place. I just saw you at Emerald Cup Awards. We were randomly like bumped into each other and we're like, oh, let's sit down. So that was nice to get to kind of like actually you and I get to finally meet and kind of hang out. But I see you doing a bunch of stuff. It seems like in the conversation right now where we're talking about your relationship with Tony and Marcus and the business that you guys developed at that time, was all of that, you know, it ended at some point, right? I mean, everybody went their separate ways.
So like Marcus was already working with Tony. He's like, look, I think we could do a lot together. And I flew out and checked out what Tony was learning from Marcus at the time and how, you know, that was going. And I wanted to bring Marcus and Tony and myself and Ernie at the time was a part of it too, Ernie Blackman, and bring us all together to build kind of this like new super group that thinks way outside the box, and to obtain a medical license at that in Pennsylvania, and then to work with Thomas Jefferson University, because I became a part of the Lambert School of Cannabinoid Research, because I just felt like, wow, all right, cool, man. These guys are going to go to another country and then bring that research back and try to learn about where things were at. And at the time, you know, look, we didn't know a fraction of the things we know even today. This is, you know, so
like Meshulam probably had the most research at that point, right?
100%. And still to this day, he might still, you know, you know, so I think it's, you know, it was really cool to dream that big with everyone, and then bring my childhood homies together, or my childhood homie that's like, you know, again, street basketball. It's like, of course, bro, let's get on the same team. Let's go. You know, let's run the same play. You know what I memean? So it's, it's still a big dream of mine, is to eventually work with Marcus, and he knows that, and we all feel the same way. So we will revisit that, I think, when we have the right opportunity. But yeah, that's what was the idea, was to bring everything that we were all doing together under one roof, to bring prana and bring all the extraction tech and bring the solventless vape cart that we were all tinkering with, and fully develop that out together, and then to fully kind of like launch that into you know, into the world together. But again, we were pretty equipped to get a license at the time. Like, yeah, we could raise the money, we could put together the team, but could we write a great application for us to translate that knowledge on paper? That's a different ballgame. I mean, that's
all different languages, man.
You have to understand. Yeah, it's not, when you win licenses in these states that are non-check the box, as I say, it becomes really difficult, because you have to then articulate that through writing and great language and plans and all these things. At the time, you know, talking almost 10 years ago at this point,
project management.
Yeah, we weren't equipped for it those times, if I'm really honest about it. But did we have the skills to really make an impact and still have those skills? Absolutely. It just, you know, it just wasn't, the universe, it wasn't ready, right? That's how I look at it. The universe wasn't ready for that to come together yet.
For sure. Speaking of licensing, though, the year following, you were
100%.
awarded one of the first hemp licenses, and you set up a regenerative, fully organic hemp farm. I think it was quite a sizable hemp farm in Hudson, New York. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I met a gentleman named Ben Dobson, who's if Ben is out there, big love Ben. We in New York State all owe Ben and a lot of other individuals a lot for helping push the bill today that we have currently on the table. Is it perfect? No, but is it really close to something that resembles, you know, paying homage to people that have been doing this? It's about as close as I've ever seen. So he had a certified organic farm that he turned over into a regenerative farm, and he was starting to grow hemp. And I was introduced to him through Phylos Bioscience at the time, and him and I decided to forge a relationship, and they gave me acreage on their farm, and we grew regenerative hemp together. So at scale, you know, I think his farm was doing, the farm was doing around 58, 60 or 65 acres of regenerative, fully certified organic hemp. And the plants are beautiful. Everything was forged and fermented on the farm. It was a great example of what could be if you replace these with drug cultivars. And it was a good learning experience in the state, in a microclimate, as to what we could grow and how much rain fell, you know, basically what happened over several seasons, and aggregating that, you know, is invaluable. I mean, it's why I think some of these hemp farmers are going to be really successful, and why some of them won't be.
Especially before you bring in the THC.
100%. And and they have a you know, today there's a drug cultivar license on the property today. That's a part of the new rollout for the state. And you know, there's a greenhouse with an acre of outdoor, and I think the property is set up well because of these things that they've already done. They know, you know, what the soil is capable of, and what, you know, what is possible, essentially. I think it's one of so that's how I approached, you know, looking at hemp. You know, hemp is really difficult. It's a really hard world to get into. I didn't really realize how hard it was going to be to get into that world, to be honest. And I got in at a time when it was not early enough, you know, and I was, from an economic side, I learned a lot agriculturally, which was invaluable based on how much pain economically it cost.
Yeah, no, it's a great place to kind of cut your teeth in terms of larger scale production, because all you're doing is changing the genetics of the plant you're growing.
100%.
So cannabis is probably easier to grow, but
Yeah, in some ways. I mean, some of the hemp varietals are pretty hardy, though. I mean, it's, like Super Haze and Lifter. I mean, those guys are like incredible plants. I mean, if you've ever grown those plants, you can see why they do well at scale. It's good varietals. But yeah, we produced certified organic oil out of that spot, and it was actually certified organic ethanol that was used for that project. We couldn't use water hash for a million reasons, but that's what that project was all about. It was cool though, it was really good to see CBG at scale, learn about all these really minor cannabinoids, and learn about what's possible for the future in the Northeast.
Nice.
So following that, in 2018, you were approached by a group to design and help build out one of the largest vertical indoor facilities, as well as what I believe to be one of the first hash programs in that state. Can you talk a little bit about that project and what your role looked like in that project?
Yeah, so I was approached by a board, two guys who had raised some cash out of Pennsylvania to build a vertical with them in outside Boston in Massachusetts. And what I did is I they kept the name. I created the logo, the typeset, worked with one of my best friends, Nick Ace, and his company Collins to kind of fully realize all the branding and assets, and work super closely with Nick on that. Designed all the packaging with my wife, and designed all the ideology around the ethics of and what the company embodied, right? And then built the hash lab out. Worked with them on 55,000 square feet of workflow space, so there's 10 rooms. It was quite challenging, but it finally got there at some point. And then I brought in all of the genetics. So I brought in like everything you had seen, and then I brought in a ton of seeds. Like, I mean, I don't know, like just a lot of work. So I brought in, a lot of varietals. I brought in actually some outcrosses I made with Mac 1. I did all, like right before I came up there, I did my last run. I did what I never really do, which is like pollen chunk a bunch of stuff to get it out. And then I put it away in bags. And I was like, I'm never going to run this shit. And I actually ended up running a couple 2 10-packs just to see what they would do, and they were just phenomenal. I was like, damn, this is like really, really good. So nice. I packed those up, brought those in the facility, gave them the facility, and we ran those. So we did Mac times wedding cake, Mac times AFGUI, actually, and a couple other ones. But so I brought in a bunch of stuff, set them up, and created a dynamic. It was what I was really proud about that project, was that we created a great brand, right? A really strong presence of a brand, and the logo is really strong. And we also created a really strong hash program that was missing, like gaping hole in that whole market at the time. There's nothing. And we came out of the gates with full melt, like 6-star full melt. Only had one thing that I graded 5-star. And it was only because it was GG4.
You're biased. You're biased. That's understandable.
So, yeah. So,
and I've noticed that you haven't mentioned the brand or talked about any of that stuff. So that's probably the next part of this.
Yeah, I mean, look. Here's what I'll say is like I wish everyone well, but I think what I want to do in this space, what I'm doing currently is more towards the end of that, and innovation is something I'm really keen on. And I don't know, it's hard. This is a hard industry to find the right pack, so I'm very proud of what I did, but I'm more excited about where I'm going and the things that are to come that weren't possible in those 4 walls at one point. Yep. So that's what I'll say about that. And it's for another time and not a but it's
don't worry, because we're going to switch to another controversial topic. So and Collin, alluded to it a little bit earlier and just touched on it, but you were actually very close to Philo's Gate, and one of their largest or larger contributors or donors.
Yeah.
I know it's probably not a favorite subject to talk about, but I'd love for you to share your take on that whole situation.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's what I'll say about Phylos is I think Nishan and Mowgli initially, and I think they do mean well. Like they want to change and progress. I just think that they didn't have an understanding of what the guiding, how to get there and what the right like checks and balances were to get to the end goal that I know they saw. And when I met them at the Natural History Museum, actually in New York, when they did the partnership with them. And my cousin was working there. He's like, yo, you got to get down here and see this. This is exactly what you've been talking about for like 2 years, dude. Genomic sequencing and verifying genetics. So when you tell someone you have sour or you tell someone you have whatever it is exactly what you say it is. And here's proof of that. So I got all giddy and excited and started gearing up to give them as much as I could, because what I understood of it was it's crowdsourced. As much as we give, as much as we get back, right?
Yep.
So I was like, cool, man, here's the whole catalog. Here's as much as you can get, as much as you can take. Please, take it. And I'll even start new seeds and stuff that I have no reason to start, and, and just give it to you, because I am that interested in understanding the things that we think we know, but we quite frankly just don't know. So I get it. I got really excited. So I passed a lot of, material their way and signed up for their program. We cut them a check. We did everything that we needed to do to participate in the program, just like everyone else did. I think everyone that was at that breeders syndicate or whatever they called it at the time, did a similar thing. It's where I met like Cult Classic Seeds was there. I mean, there's a bunch of cats that were there. I mean, it was a lot of individuals were there, and we were all drinking the Kool-Aid, man. It was just like a big Kool-Aid party. It was like, yeah, they had terped out cocktail. I mean, it was everything you could ever want in at that time was at your fingertips there. So what happened was our hopes and dreams got dismantled, for those that don't know, and those that do know, I'm sure they're like snoring right now. We basically, I got a call from Mowgli. I remember I was sitting in my studio, remember the place, and he just told me, I'm going to start a nursery. And I remember when he told me about it, and I just said to him, like, well, where does that leave us? You're essentially going to be a competitor. I thought you were here to help us build a better future for our catalogs and for us to be the one who gives out these new varietals and develops these next gen breeding projects, and for us as the individuals that have been stewards of this to continue that work in a more professional and a more data-driven manner, so we could essentially help push the needle forward as a core community. And what I found is that, look, no fault to you, Mowgli, or anyone. I think that when you're back out against the wall, you made the wrong decision, and he made the wrong decision because he's appeasing his board of directors. However, I don't think his testing business was making him any money. And I think those are the reasons why we saw these things happen. And that's why it all went down the way it did. I mean, the guy needed to save a business. And again, we have all been in this so long that for some of us, it wasn't a business, right? And it was a passion, right? And when you look at it from all these different lenses, it's so hard to just view this as a business. I think it really is. It took me a really long time as a young cannabis enthusiast, as I just love to call myself, because I think it simplifies things, is just, dude, having a business is a different mindset in cannabis. It's just different. It's so personal. Like, this is so personal to me. People don't understand how long when you have like kept plants and have propagated a single varietal or a group of single varietals for as long as 15 years or plus, it's a different feeling, man. So I think that's the thing that Phylos lost sight of, is the inability to keep their ethics forward, and they had to eventually make the money that they took. And I wish that they didn't make those decisions, because we would be all in a different, I think, talking about them in a different light today. But it is what it is, and that's why we have other genomic research companies out there doing similar work. And you have people like Kevin McKernan over at Medicinal Genomics, who I work with on hop-laden viroid studies, and he's basically doing what they should have done: make picks and shovels. We're farmers. I need to buy picks and shovels. Like, I need to do that. Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that work you're doing with Kevin?
Yeah. So Kevin has a really awesome array of assays that test for 12 different types of viroids, and it's all specific to cannabis, though. These are not assays that have existed that they bought from other horticultural scientific companies that they're repurposing for cannabis. This is an assay built on cannabis for cannabis to exploit the possible viroids that could attack the plant and the cells in the plant. So what's really interesting about this is that it's a really great tool and mechanism for all of us as cultivators to have access to. It only costs, I think, $25 for a test. And you can really quickly, when you get a clone from a friend, determine if this thing's clean over 12 different types of viroids, which is really unique. And it's fairly cheap, So, and if you're a nursery that does millions of cuts a day, and, I get it, that gets expensive really fast. But I would bet a lot that if you reached out to Medicinal Genomics, they'd work with you guys. So I've been working with Kevin because he has the tools to basically, in my opinion, unlock some of these things that we don't understand. And I was given a clone by a large nursery out in California that is just huge. Like, they feed a lot of people, and it struck hot for hop-laden viroid. It was just bonkers. I couldn't believe it. I never experienced this before, and I called all my closest friends, tried to get, what do you do? Burn it was what everyone told me. I'm like, okay, well, that feels weird, because if I have like really rare cuts that only I have, or only a certain subset of people have, what happens when we all get it? Like, what do we do then? We all burn it? That's the only solution? Well, that doesn't seem, to me at least, doesn't seem like a great path forward. And I don't know if that's the right path forward, because then what are we really doing to our gene pool? We're just killing things, right? So I reached out to Kevin and said, look, man, I can't imagine getting like all these other plants I have sick and then having no one to go to. So can we sit down and develop a method that we can give guidance to the rest of the community, and go through TC culture, go through all the remediation techniques, from radiology to cold therapy to stem cell to everything in between, and then whatever out of those techniques is the path, make it very clear step by step, and we give that out to the community so they know exactly what to do. That's what.
So essentially, develop remediation or some sort of
100%. Then developing synthetic seed around that too, so you never have to deal with this ever again. Period. Smart. So synthetic seed, I think, is a very important mechanism for us moving forward. Is it the only mechanism? No. Is it a tool in the box? Yes. Very great tool in the box. So I think that's the future of where we're headed, and I'm really studying and learning more about how that could be done at a macro lens level that we could then industrialize for, consistency reasons, and then being able to your point, Addison, like from Colorado to California to New York State, how do you grow the same flower? Right?
Yeah. I mean, you can have the same cut.
It's not going to make a difference, right?
Yeah. I mean, you could have the same, exact same source genetics, but how's it going to react? I mean, what's great about California is we have such a big space. You can kind of figure out where things grow well and grow them in those spaces, which is, you know, a smart thing to do. When you're looking at a landmass like Maine or Vermont or some of these other places, it's a little harder. That's why I don't want to leave California. I feel like I'll keep this unfair advantage forever, to have like a much better environment for everything. A lot of consumers, great grow environment. It's like, but no, I mean, you need to, tissue culture is the way. That's like, everyone figured that out quite a bit, you know, a long time ago. Lablets are a lot easier to work with, and you can clean things up. And but remediation for everything is necessary. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of CRC, but the fact that you can apply a method to remediate and make something more appealing and make it consumable, make it safe to consume, great idea. And in this case, when it comes to genetics, it's you know, it's super important, because you're right. Like, if the answer is to just burn everything, eventually, you know, we're gonna have nothing left. So how do you fix it? So how did that go? Did you guys were able to figure out through?
So we're working on it now.
Remediate?
Yeah, so we're working with a lab right now, and I think we just sent them the samples like even a week ago. We've been re-vegging. I have this plant that I've had. It's funny. So when I got that cut from, I can't say the name. I really want to say the name, but I won't.
It's all good.
And I know people are like, please tell me so I know. Well, look, the way you're going to know is when you test your own plants and you're proactive yourself. And that's what I want everyone to walk away with from this convo, is that it's about being proactive too.
It takes it.
So anyway, so I had gotten this cut, and then I put it next to another mom that I've had literally, man, for 26 years. And that plant was passed on and is even older. So we're remediating that plant right now, because it was the only plant that I could feel like it's worthy of doing this, right? Mm-hmm. And when we sequenced that plant, it was such an outlier that I was like, of course, we got to save this thing. Come on. Mm-hmm. You know, so that'll be done probably, I don't know, I would say in February or March of next year. I think that's when we're realistically going to get through this, because it takes a good 12 or 13 months, you know, to really go through this process. So it's not as immediate as I'd want it to be, but it's just the way where we're at today.
A lot of people don't realize that the time period 100%. That it takes even to take genetics from from the form that we see them in, to clean them up and bring them into tissue culture and pop a lablet out. Like, can you talk more about that? Like the actual frame of time that it takes to do that?
Yeah, it takes, 8 to 12 weeks. And then plus it depends on the varietal too. And every agar has to be designed specifically for each varietal. There's IP behind every single varietal there is. And even the different places you'll take it, if you use a cuticle, there's different approaches to different parts of the plant to get the same results. So these are very intricate.
Just to say, so to note for the people that are listening, the agar is the medium that you're putting the plant into. So
I got to get some water. I'll be right back.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting stuff. That's like just like you have to put a plant into either a medium like soil or whatever. It's the same thing. You have to figure out which specific medium, which agar is going to be the correct one for that to react correctly, to be the best environment for it. And there's fucking so many of them. So hats off to anybody that's doing that stuff, because it does take quite a while just to be able to do that magic. But the reality of what they can do is you can go buy an eighth of weed at a dispensary and then take a leaf off that weed that you bought at the dispensary. This is correct, right? You could take that leaf and then put it into the program.
Not a dead. You can't take a dead dried leaf.
It can't be dead. Okay, so it has to be.
No. It has to be live, and that's where I think.
I've been told you can take a dead dry leaf and remake that. I've been told that
I'm not aware if that's possible, but if there's someone out there in the audience or otherwise that wants to reach out to me and show me where that's possible, I would love to learn that. But I've never. It's why when I looked at Phylos, why it just wasn't worth to even pursue any further. It's just because they don't. The information is only very valuable to a very specific subset of minds that truly understand what to do with that information, and that amongst itself is very rare. I just want to say that. So when someone says they're going to take your DNA and make money off of it, I have to roll that back and say, hey, what do you define that? Because you know how many things that you have to do to even get that to be valuable. I mean, you'd have to have another varietal that there's reason to look into the genetic markers to then borrow those, to use those, to cross those, to make something, which would take you energy, money, time, and resources that you probably would take another path if you knew it. You know, it's easier to take two F1s and make a new offspring than to go through all that.
There's no shortage of bullshit in the cannabis industry, so it's
true, no doubt. But I'm just trying to illustrate, like, it's in utopia. Yeah, we're like in the Jetsons with this info, but we have to understand we're not. We're using it in a very limited capacity. It is valuable, but in a very limited capacity.
Dude, that's why my journey is just to smoke hash. It's not to be some scientist. It's not to like solve the problems of the world. Like, I just want to like make hash better and add to the supply of hash that's available to give people the same experience and happiness. I have a simple mission. It's very, you know, it doesn't even require a degree of any type. That's the thing.
I'm following in his footsteps, so that's what I'm here for.
Well, I mean, what else are you supposed to do if you work in an industry and you love it and you've been in it for a long time and you're looking for your place? Your place is going to come from you. It's going to come from what your skills are. And an industry is a big place. Cannabis industry is huge. It's got accountants. It's got all these things. You could love cannabis and be a really fucking awesome accountant, and you're in the cannabis industry. Yeah. You know, and then now that you're in there, you work with all the best companies as their accountant. Example. Sure. But that's kind of like, you know, like for guys like us that have been in this fucking thing forever, it's the same thing. You've been in it, you have access, you have a crazy Rolodex. Now, how are you gonna find your place? You know, and I'm lucky. I like supply chain. I think that's a fucking wonderful place to be. It's a great little area to kind of find yourself in. Every direction I turn, I'm with one of my friends and one of their things, and it's perfect. And like you seek answers though. You're more like, I feel like you want to develop this solution or you have this different.
I just have this desire to like learn, I guess, is really what it comes down to for me. And I love process. Like, it's why I surround myself with instruments. It's like, I learn every single one of those. You think I don't know those instruments frontwards and backwards with my eyes closed? You kidding me? I can make anything on individual synths because I know them inside and out. And I know the synth architecture and what components make them up. It's the same with genetics, the same with processing to me. Yep. That's what makes me tick, is like, I'm trying to make a baseline, so I need to use a mini moog. I'm not going to use a CS15 because it's just too crunchy. It's too sonically too heavy, right? Same thing with hash making. I want to grow it's like why I love Stardog. It's like tennis balls with like this perfect hint of sprinkle of fruit underneath, right? Mm-hmm. And these are all like assets, right? That all come together like a color palette does, like I've said before, like the blank canvas, and you're kind of creating your own destiny with this stuff. And the terpenes and the analytes and the thiols and all these other, all of it, like all of the things, I could just go on and about. Yeah. What makes me tick is understanding the things that we just don't know, right? I love it. Yeah. It's just this, it brings me back to being that 15-year-old kid again, in like sweating my face off, like in the field of plants, stem rubbing, and like, I'm going to break the branch on this one and hang it. And then I'm going to put weights on this one and see the difference and how it bounces back. those little iterations and that little spark of like just call and response to me is what brings me back every day and has for the past 2.5 decades.
The best way I've been able to explain it is that we have this addiction. We have an addiction towards the order of operations in which things occur. And there's a comfort that comes from understanding the exact order of operations in which things occur from the beginning to the end. And there's a love that, I mean, I feel comfortable, and I see that in yourself. It's like the same sort of like, yeah, you have that love for knowing this is the proper way in full harmony that this occurs, or that this process should occur, or this other thing. And like, that's a gift. That's definitely like a cool ass thing to have, like, for sure. And it makes things better. So that's a good thing.
Man.
I'm glad you're in cannabis, you know.
Thanks. Yeah, it's, problem solving, man. I don't know, like, it's the same as writing music. Like, I don't think if there's any songwriters out there, I mean, it is a mountain, dude, to get through writing. I mean, it's the same thing, man. Like, I don't know. I put a lot of pressure on myself sometimes on like, I'm not supposed to, basically, but I put the pressure on myself to be like, you're going to do this today and you're not going to stop until you figure that out.
Yeah.
And it's really insane.
Discipline.
Yeah, but it's also sometimes, I think also it's debilitating too, because you get so obsessed, dude. Like, I can't tell you how obsessive I get with certain process techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll stay up all night, man. Even today, I'll stay up until like 5:30 in the morning, just like trying to get something perfect. Or, I need the perfect ramp as I press to get like this one. Oh, I noticed the terp, like, you get in your own head. You notice
Mm-hmm.
certain nuances you're trying to capture, so you can then do them at a production scale. That's kind of, I don't know. I want everyone to have good hash, and I feel like we can get there if we continue to be honest with ourselves. And that's what I'm trying to do every day is be as real as I can and call myself out, like, for real. Like, it's hard to do a lot of this stuff, and to, not everyone's built to be in a walk-in freezer for 16 hours a day.
Fuck no.
That's the other thing is, like, I don't care. Like, I'm like, I just throw a pair of long johns on and a jacket and I'm cool.
Neoprene.
I like surfing. I like surfing in the winter.
So you've had a long-standing relationship with PAX, and they recently approached you and brought you on as head of formulations. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with them and your role at the company?
Yeah, so PAX has been super great, actually. They want to change, and move the needle forward in cannabis, and utilizing technology and great formulation and, good ethics, I think, is something that I rarely see from a company. And I see them trying really hard to break out of where they were to go somewhere new and to chart new territories in an interesting way. And I actually really love working with them because they give me the freedom to be creative, and they believe in what I do. And I believe in the things that they're thinking about. And I think it's fun. It's super fun to me to be able to like use the muscles in my mind that I know that could be helpful for something like that. And really focus on something for the first time, because a lot of projects I'm brought into, I do everything. I mean, dude, you want to talk about everything? From watering the plants to sweeping the floor to, I can't tell you, I've done everything, man, from packing my own hash. I mean, to pushing a cart down the hallway into the dispensary. I mean, I've done literally everything. So it's really cool for me to just focus on the things I love, which is great resin and taking different forms of solventless and putting them together in new ways, and just kind of, quite frankly, kind of confusing everyone, just being like, what is this? And being like, it's solventless, but like, it's not what you think. It's just a different way of putting things back together.
Frankenstein terps. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And it's extracting those terps. It's understanding how to extract those terps well, and preserving those single source, and bringing them back together in a meaningful way and in a good ratio that is actually enjoyable every time. I can't tell you how long it took me to develop that product with them. It was like, dude, I sat on a beach for months with different versions, just trying,
Oh,
boom, boom,
sat
boom,
on
and
a
just
beach for
trying stuff.
months.
And it was about the bioassay. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's seriously, it's not, I mean, it's a very selfish thing to say, but it's not only, it's about the bioassay for me and how that's making me feel. And then, do I enjoy this? That's all it's about, you know? So it was really cool to be able to do that and then put it out and just like have everyone be like, what is this? It was kind of funny. I mean, I thought I was like laughing, just kind of be like, awesome, like whatever. You know, so but yeah, so it's really great, and there's a lot of things that I'm working on that are to come, you know, with them, that I think will be really, really awesome for solventless in general. They want to, you know, they're a great company, and it's super cool. You know, I'm really honored to be able to do what I love to do.
That's awesome, man. I think they picked the right guy. I think they picked the right guy, no doubt. I actually also heard you've secured a license in New York State. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I have a hemp license in New York State that's being turned over right now into a drug cultivar license. And yeah, you know, I think New York is really an interesting state. It's where a lot of this started for me, as we talked earlier. And I'd love to help shape that market with PACs and other you know, other individuals like that. And I think, you know, it's an interesting, New York, I think, is going to take a long time. I think it's 36 months, man. I'm just going to say maybe even longer, you know? But it's a really, yeah, I think where things are going from here is like, it's going east and trying to help build out the markets out here as much as I can, wherever that's, you know, wherever that's fit, if that makes sense.
As an insider, as somebody who's spent a lot of time in New York State, what are some of the challenges that you foresee that are unique to New York that maybe other states going through legalization wouldn't have to necessarily experience?
Well, it's some of the same, some different. I think, you know, the one thing you have to understand is we don't have the same culture out here as the West Coast has. It's still really in the woodwork. Like, there's still people that like are working professionals that just don't want people to know that they smoke weed every day. You know, and that's it's a different type of ism, a different type of person. And so I think New York has a lot of challenges to get over, the type of user. So I think, you know, a lot of these products that we're so used to seeing in these super developed markets may not perform as well. However, I think it'll be exciting for some of these new users to see them, and I don't think that's a reason for them not to do it. But it just, don't expect overnight to be like, yes, we're clicking, like they're, you know. So I think that's one thing I want to call out. And then there's a really strong delivery service, traditional delivery service world in New York that is never truly going to go away. And it's unlike California. It's really cheap to deliver cannabis in a tightly, densely populated area because of how many individuals on that one route you can actually capture. So it's, you know, while people will be like, yeah, we've tried, you know, economically, it just doesn't make sense. Well, you haven't tried it in a city where everyone sleeps on top of each other and it's all vertical, because one building, you know, there it is. It's, you know, you could probably service quite a bit of people in a short amount of time. So I think that's it's something to look out for. And then, you know, the inability at scale to have the foresight and knowledge that a lot of these individuals at scale in these other states have, you know. And I think agriculturally, you know, as we've seen in the past, cannabis is not a one-to-one crop. There's a lot to learn. There's, you know, it's a lot, you know. It's not just planting and cutting the rope on the ship. It's how do you dry and cure and pack and, you know, keep this stuff in a long-term, you know, Russian doll, or however you look at this stuff, method. You know, those are the challenges I see this state kind of coming up against. And then retail, where is retail today? If retail is not set up now, September, October, November is coming quick, man. The plants don't know. They can't hold off. They're going to finish and they're going to be ready, you know. And and if the retail's not ready, that's going to sit, and that's going to be, as we all know, perishable. So I do have concerns over those things right now, and microbial counts, and I mean, I could just go on and on. The IPM management, and talking about things that you have to go through this stuff to really learn it. You can be told all day long what to do, but being preventative growing at scale is very, very difficult. So it's why we don't see grape cannabis a lot in the markets today that are fully mature, right? I mean, it's just bad IPM management and bad harvesting protocols and bad drying and curing. And then, of course, where are they going to put this stuff in barrels, and are those environments properly thought about, and all of that costs money and infrastructure and time,
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that we just need to take a step back to take 2 steps forward is what I would say to the individuals looking at New York today. So
yeah, I think it's going to have a cooling off period like California, where the black market will get so strong, because it is so strong already, that anything that comes out in the rec market, if it's not batched correctly for release, in the correct way, then the whole thing will go to shit. It seems like, because there'll be too much available on that market. Because in their mindset, they're like, oh, we have this population of consumers. It's like, yeah, but X percentage of your population of consumers are never going to go into a dispensary. They're going to just thrive from this and stay on the black market. And that's like the same thing as California, is that the black market's so heavy and so strong. I think the difference between California and New York is that California will continue to, be a draw in the non-rec states for their products, where I don't see the guys in Texas being like, oh, I've got to get my 710 from New York. I think it's more, that the way,
there's already
how
incredible
the black market
hash in
works.
New York. Already incredible.
Oh my God, yeah.
Already incredible flower. Already
Yep.
incredible talent there. I think the micro businesses here's my call. This is my fortune cookie call. The micro licenses will drive the New York market, because the micro licenses will be available for people like you and I. Mm-hmm. And once those individuals get a hold of a license and turn that into a business, and they're successful, there's no turning that off. Especially in New York, because it's such a densely populated area, you can fully function.
Oh, bro!
There's nothing.
They'll be making hash of the Williamsburg Bridge.
You don't even need all 5. You literally
Definitely.
don't. You don't.
Nope.
So that's what I think, and I don't know if a lot of these legacy individuals are going to actually turn over. I just don't believe that they have any desire to.
Nope, I agree with you. I think that's kind of good, and that's what I mean by the fact that there'll be a very strong resistance from from that black market that's there. Plus, too, I mean, you gotta, there's organizations that have been there forever that have thrived from that black market and that have done well from it, and we've already seen in the last couple of years, like, different things. Kind of what's interesting about New York is that you went from stop and frisk to what's there now, and it's fucking crazy. It's so crazy. You went from being
like
hunted,
myself, it's still I was just in the city, and I was walking around in Long Island City, actually. I was walking around in Long Island City on the river, and I was just decided to pull my Puffco out, and I was I couldn't help it. I just kept on looking over my shoulder, man. I'm not kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't stop. And I was and then I saw these group of young, I don't know, 20-something-year-old girls, just totally ripping a full blunt. I'm why do I feel this way? It's so silly.
Well, you were hunted for so long.
It's ingrained. I don't know what it is, man.
Yeah. I mean, New York wasn't even like other places. New York, you were hunted. They fucking set up, traps to catch people. And they would go to areas that were the best place to get high. And they'd fucking set up these traps. It was the most insane shit I'd ever seen in my entire life. I think we got in trouble one time sitting in a fucking Best Buy parking lot or something.
Dude, my brother got arrested. We were playing music in a studio. We used to rent these rehearsal spaces, and we were outside, and he just literally just as he's opened the joint, the dude's excuse me, sir, you're gonna need to come with me. Like, it's, you know, there's more plainclothes police in New York than there is actual in uniform, just so everyone's aware. And that's real. That's a real comment. It's not an opinion. That's fact. So you're always under, it's always under fire, you know, like you're in that city, you just never know, man. And it was always like
not anymore.
I know. And
now it just smells like weed everywhere.
Everywhere. I was at a baseball game and yeah, man, just everywhere. I mean, it's amazing. We won in my eye. I mean, we haven't won. We haven't really won because there's still people going to jail for this, but we're getting close to something that resembles what I think with the future that we want to see, you know?
Yeah.
But it's always a battle.
We've made progress for sure.
So I want to circle back, switch gears a little bit, and talk about something that really started at the beginning of your story, which is your genetics and the genetics that you've carried throughout all these years. And I mean, I believe it to be 89 that you started working on what is now called your lemon cake. Can you talk a little bit about that plant and what is so special about it that made you carry it for over 20 years?
So lemon cake came about in 98. 98 summer into 99 was when I pollinated that. And I pollinated that outside. I remember these plants were in the ground. This is native soil. And I pollinated that batch during that time. And then I grew out those seeds that winter, right? And selected it around that time there. So I immediately dried those seeds, popped those seeds, ran those seeds, and selected the one. And the reason I selected the one is because, number one, it made so much hash. I mean, immediately I could see that my cardboard at the time, mind you, was just this a lot. It was just a lot of material that I was collecting, and it was really nice material. It was really, really melty. And at the time, you have to understand, we didn't look at hash the same way that we look at hash today. Color was less important. It was more about the melt factor and how it tasted at the time. So, because you have to understand, like, air dried hash is mainly oxidized heads, and we were also at the time growing and drying the material. This is not fresh frozen. So most of the material is amber heads to begin with. So it's not like we were washing these really blonde batches that were staying super light through the whole process, because we weren't growing for those things, and we weren't paying attention to the trichometes the way that we do today.
So can you dive into the genetics on the lemon cake? I know that was
So lemon cake was gifted to me as I had, I don't know, maybe 50, 58, 60 seeds of this stuff at the time. And I had started 25 seeds, and those seeds went outside, and I culled a bunch of males that were, or not males, but I culled a bunch of things that I just didn't think, they were like super hempy looking, just wasn't, you could just tell that they were all just messed up. So, and look, at the time, it wasn't as proficient as I am today, let's put it that way. So starting all of these things was meaning you had to take care of them. So I narrowed it down to, growing that varietal. It was basically a narrow leaf variety that went super long. So what I did is I took cuts from that, because that's what we did. And I let the males go, and I collected the male pollen. And then I aggregated all the male pollen together in one big bag, right? And then I was growing the NL5 times tie, right? And I hit that pollen to the NL5, or the skunk one NL5 tie. So it was a skunk one NL5 tie that I had.
Yeah.
And that was the first iteration that summer in 98, 99 of me exploring the things that I had been reading and learning about at that time. It was like, all right, man, now I got to make more seed, you know, where else am I going to get it from? You know? So, and it's simple. It's that simple. I got to be honest. It wasn't like I'm going to breed and make this variety and it's going to be called this and I have a purpose. Not at all. You know, I'm going to make an outcross because I'm interested in doing it. And I found something interesting that I've kept my whole life.
Yeah. It's interesting to me, somebody who's as well-versed, well-traveled, and well-educated in this space is still holding on to something because, you know, the fact that what you had at that young of an age and that first cross you made is still in your eyes tremendously valuable is I think a really cool story, as far as, you know, so many people, myself included, who, you know, had stuff at a young age, and I'm very glad I didn't hold on to it because, you know, it wouldn't have held up to what's
funny. It's funny you say that. I at one point I had the G13 Fig Widow and I had that plant. And I was like, all right, I can only keep one. Which one is it going to be? And for whatever reason, I did something and the G13 was being super finicky. And I was like, I'm out, I'm done. And I just like with impulse chopped that one. And I was like, thank God. Also, one thing that comes to mind in that moment is Genius. I was growing Genius a lot during that time as well. I don't know if anyone remembers that varietal at all. Genius was sativa dom varietal. You know, yeah. Anyway, so if anyone's listening and remembers that, it's a great varietal. Yeah, it's what G13 Genius from Brothers Grimm is, and a lot of like Space Queen and other things have Genius in it. It's been around for a really long time. So, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the square wave? That was like, was that, what was the goal there? Was that a cross with a planned outcome that you were looking for, or was that just an exploratory cross?
Well, they're always exploratory, but I was actually looking to bring down the flowering time, and I wanted to look back towards that seed stock that I had, and I was kind of looking for a good reason to do it. And at the time I was actually growing a lot of like equatorial, a lot of like longer flowering time varietals, just because I just was interested in the terp profiles back then and really trying to explore a lot of that stuff. So in trying to get away from terpenoline, to be honest, I was like really trying to get away from Jack because everything at that time was like some cross of it. You know, a lot of the Dutch stuff. So, I was going through this line because it didn't have any of this stuff in it, right? It just was like really fruity and really strawberry and had all these like really great, like different kind of notes that I wasn't seeing in other lines. So, but I was looking for something more indica dom, right? And so I went back into those seeds and I found something more NL5 dom. It was like kind of wider leaf, and then brought that back to a Shiva skunk that I had that was a cut that was gifted to me from the actual area that I grew up in. And that, you know, it just created this like really hashy indica dom plant. It's like super hashy. You know, it reminds me of, I don't know, it's really difficult to explain. It's like a hash plant forward varietal that has like this like underlying cherry note to it. It's like this little like hint of cherry to it. It's really interesting. So I really that's where that and why that came about. And it's a good hash maker. It's like it really, you know, it's like 4.8 to 5% depending on you know how you grow it. But it's always been since we ran it, and that's like, it's my cousin Zach actually who's the one that was like, you gotta keep this one, man. This is like the one. So I actually wasn't gonna keep it, and then we ended up keeping it, and it's one of our favorite varietals. And we have a bunch of older stock of it. I still have F1s of it that I'm like really curious to go through it. A lot of that stuff when I get a chance. So
the last one I wanted to talk about is the New York City garlic. Can you talk a little bit about that breeding project? I think that's something very cool.
Yeah, so that was done in Brooklyn, like literally done in Brooklyn. That was done in Clinton Hill in Bed-Stuy, and on the border right there. And that variety is a really garlic forward varietal that it's a shorter version, shorter flowering time, and like really is super sour. It's really garlicky, but has this really sour hint to it. So a lot of the homies that I'm friends with were like, this is the new sour for us. This is like the Clinton Hill sour, because this is the one that finishes 9-10 weeks. It yields better, has really insane bag appeal, has a little purple hint to it at times. Exactly. It's just like it checked all the boxes. Nothing else was checking at the time. And then it's a 6.4%, like 6.4% on yield.
Well, sour diesel's a banger. Like sour diesel
It can
makes
be.
some fucking. There's some. I've seen some versions of sour that get 5-6% fucking. You know, Alex from Resin Extracts. He was hitting on some sour some melt that he had for a minute that was so fucking good. Just captured the flavor and taste and everything so perfectly. But no, that sounds like quite the cultivar. What's the is that available for hunt, like, or is that just locked in, or what's the
Yeah,
story on
so we only have like a couple hundred seeds of that, but we have a selected mom of that is like, it's really good. It's really good. It's one of my favorite varieties. It's actually, if everything could go away or had to go away and I had to keep one, it would be that, because that just like even the flower is just like, it's ridiculous. I have a friend who calls me, who actually is the only guy outside of my stable that has it. Like he calls me and just like, it's like love letters. He's like, yo, dude, you don't understand. You just don't understand how good this.
I love you, man. I fucking love you, bro.
He's a Christian. If you're listening, brother, I love you, man.
That's so funny. Well, I mean, I'd like to be that guy, but if you give it to me, I'm gonna put it into pipeline, and everyone in California is gonna have it. So
that's fine. You can.
That's the only difference.
It's one of those ones where I think I've gotten what I needed out of it, and I think it's amazing. It should be. If I try to play God, it's gonna be like all the other things I've lost that I've been like, damn it, if I could just have kept that. You know, and it's
where are you at right now? Are you in Cali or are you on the East Coast?
No, I'm on the East Coast right now. I'm actually in
Addison like just drooling a little bit. He's like, "Where are you located right now?"
Well, geographically, where are you at the moment with this cut?
I'll be West Coast soon, man. We'll bring you some of this right here.
So,
yeah,
any
let me
new
know.
projects on the horizon with this work?
So, with the genetic work. So so I've been working on V2s of lemon cake. I've been working on V2s of square wave, and I'm working on doing either an F2 of garlic and working that all the way through, because I'm really just interested into seeing the diversity and what happens with that line. I'm a creature of habit. I know everyone's like, let's make F1s and just make everything new. I love the ideology of being able to explore a single line and seeing the diversity. It's like two parents having a lot of kids, and you're just like, what? That one's weird. That one's awesome. That one's interesting. But they all are like together make something wholly different from the same line. I'd love to see more of that go down with, just way peat breeders are looking at things today. F1s are
like different.
It's just a pick your own adventure every time, though. So
absolutely. Addison touched on this a little bit before, but I'd love to get your take on, with the recent popularity of hash breeding, quote unquote, coming into vogue in the community. Do you feel that there's a lot more that the cannabis plant has the ability to give as far as yields in solventless, or do you feel as though the GMO and GMO outcrosses are kind of where the plant maxes itself out at?
I don't think we have any definitive data to say one way or another. I think that's the honest truth. But here's what I believe. I think we have right now today, we have individuals that are interested in this medium because they're so passionate about things that they're ingesting and the palates and the taste and everything that's happening, right? Which is really cool. So I think we're at the beginning of people really understanding how we actually could breed for cannabinoid production and resin production, more importantly, and targeting specific head types. And that's a whole conversation in and of itself. Like the types of trichome heads and the types of trichome heads that certain offspring express are the things that I think when you're breeding are the hardest things to actually have any wherewithal. It's like you're in a kind of in a dark room right now and bumping into stuff and you're trying stuff, and it's where I find a lot of excitement, to be honest, is in those dark rooms, because when you see a lot of that, when you bump into the corner and it hits the hip right, you're like, damn, that hurts. But we know we have a direction to go in, right? And we're starting to get feeling, we're starting to get touch and sensory, different sensories, they're starting to happen. So that conversation that's starting now, I think in 5 to 10 years, I think we're going to actually see progression. But I think it's too soon right now to say that GMO times Wilson times what is the ultimate hash plant. And I don't think so. I think that those are all great varietals, and I think they all produce really awesome resin, and they all produce and help us get more out of what we want, right? But I think it's also important for us to understand, like, what are we getting when you're saying you're getting a large yield? Are you getting stalks too? How much of that is stock, right? And what types of heads are there, right? And I think those are largely left out of the conversation when people are saying they're getting large yields of what micron? Like, are you mixing all like microns? Or are you saying that you're getting 120 through 45, and you have each one is weighed, and then there's second, first, third, fourth, fifth, whatever, as long as you go is. But I think it's hard for us to start drawing correlations as a language because we don't have the right framework put together. So when we talk about yield, it's so agnostic. It's almost like building an assumption sheet out for a company. We're going to grow this many pounds. We might sell them for this much, but
there's so many variables.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to articulate.
So many variables.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the things I think we need to get on the same vernacular first, and then and only then can we start to talk about yield percentages that make sense overall. When I say yield, it's from 120 to sometimes 45 on the right varietal, but predominantly just 90. That's it. Everything below 45 and anything below 45 is just food grade. That's all food grade material, right? So that's not that's part of the overall yield, but how are you using that, I think is up to.
Or what grade is the 45? Like that's when you look at
45
GMO,
can be really great. It just depends on the varietal, man.
But it's cultivar specific.
100%. 120, 160 can be
such a weird fucking thing.
Can throw out really great heads. It really depends. 120 can be full melt, whereas 90 and 73 are not. And I think it's important for us to call this out right now in the conversation, because it's not ever been defined by anyone, and we all circle around these terms, right? And there's no fault to anyone. It's just the way it is. But
no, it's the best. It's the best that's available at the time.
100%. Like we're where we're at, right? But I think there's real opportunity for us to define that further. But yeah, in terms of like yield, I'm at like 160 is still kind of food grade for me. Like that's a work bag. You know what I mean? Like it's really 120 to 90 for me. Everything outside of that has a purpose. It just might not be in my banger.
I mean, here's the thing too. If you're looking at like manufacturing in California, and you're looking at a large scale manufacturer, there is value to that. There is value to those other microns, because that's material that could be sold and converted, that are actives that could be stripped and converted into sellable products. And there's two different things that are occurring here. There's a breeder who understands, hey, these progenitors produce very high hash producing strains in solventless.
Yep.
There's the banana crosses, there's the GMO crosses, there's the cookies and cream crosses. Those are all great, like G13s to be used as progenitors into hash production. There's Wilson, there's different ones. There's that story, there's that conversation, and then there's that way of doing things by taking progenitors, crossing that progenitor in, and then seeing if the Alices cross over, and if it does, yay. And then, but when you do that, you're dealing with beneficial traits that you know and understand. You're searching for them because that's why you're bringing that progenitor to the table. What I think is more interesting in hash is what is the next GMO? What is the next cookies and cream? What is the next banana OG? What's that next? And I think what those are, each one of those, is they produce a large cuticle head, like a massive fucking head that connects to that to whatever micron's there from the stalk, and that's what makes it such a producer. But what we just said is, like, if you're a manufacturer in California and you're running GMO and you're getting a shitload of this 45 that's a little darker, but it could be used in, I mean, everybody knows GMO makes great material for carts and other things like this. So there is a value to it when you break it down. If it bulks and it's a fatty and it milks out, then you can use that in so many ways for your inputs, you know, and like, you know, in an organized supply chain like California's, where they're not only buying fresh frozen, now companies are buying melt and other water hash inputs that they can take and convert themselves, because
100%.
there are other microns that are less expensive that are available in bulk that could be used. And I'm not saying, like, I'm going to give any respect to somebody who's fucking taking distillate and mixing it with 45 and heating it up and turning it into some shit. Like, I have no respect for that shit. But I do have respect for when I look at a small edible company that now has strain-specific, solventless infused edibles. I'm like, this is fucking awesome, because now that producer is able to make more SKUs and be able to sell to the guy that wants the cheap bang for the buck distillate edible. You know, I hope that ends at some point, but and then now there's the solventless edible. So it could be stripped, you know, like the butcher style, strip the cow down a million ways. But it's really like,
I look at it. I look at the plant like, this is like, I'm like a chef. Like, I'm taking the roots, I'm taking the stalk, I'm taking everything, the cuticle, I'm taking everything and I'm making something of it and out of it to better understand what I can do with it and how it can benefit either my pain and my things that I go through, or better someone else's life. So,
but you're only smoking 90-120 is what it sounds like to me.
100%. And 73 if it's really good. 100%. And that's what, you know, that's the life of making hash. But like you, I think to your point, to your question, I think it's great that people are looking at this. I think that I'd love for people to even look at genetic and genomic markers, and because the information is there, we can knock out certain proteins, and that's not even GMO, man. That's just called literally CRISPR. It's editing. You're editing. You want to really go hard? That's like.
That's here. I mean, Front Range is doing it.
100%. There's a lot of people doing it, but I guess what I'm trying to illustrate is that you could do natural selection. It takes a long time, right? You can totally do it. It's my preferred method, which is the way that I do things. But I do recognize, as I learn and see everyone around me utilizing CRISPR and utilizing, you know, the ability to take that technology to a place of this kind of ideology. That's a cool tool. But yeah, I think isolating the plants that produce good resin and continuing to do that, it will, in 5 years, is my call, we will have much better contemporary varietals than we even have today. And it's going to continue to get better. Because think about why we kept sour and chem and all these other cuts. It's because we couldn't find that. We just couldn't find it. You know, you couldn't buy a market and find your own version of that back then.
The market told us what to keep. That's the market told us what to keep, because whatever sold, whatever, you know, those little gems, the market fucking runs. The market runs all of it. There's no, you know,
and sour's
any great
12
drug
weeks
dealer.
too. Sour's 12 weeks. So like in this state, we've evolved. You know, we're not most people are not running 12-week cycles. It's just the fact of the matter.
So I want to switch gears a bit, and I want to ask you about something you talked about earlier: air drying versus freeze drying, and the oxidization that takes place within the air drying. Now, is with that statement, is it safe to say that if I asked you a perfectly executed air dried resin versus perfectly executed, or as executed as best we can today, freeze dried resin, are you going to pick the freeze dried resin 10 out of 10 times, or is that a case specific answer?
It's very case specific. I mean, think about it like this. It's we have evolved so much from selecting resin. We used to believe that amber heads was the only way, right? It had to go to from clear to cloudy to amber, right? Now we're recognizing certain varietals are expressing certain traits when we pull them at cloudy, right? We know that color is a big deal to our viewers around us. Is it a big deal to me? Not really. Like, I don't really mind if I see amber heads. Like, it doesn't really affect me. It's not a signification to me that that's bad. That's just a signification that we pulled the plant at that maturity level. It's just the way it is. It's like a fruit.
The marker.
It's like the apple is going to taste different because I pulled it later, right? It's going to be a little sweeter, more sugars, right? Or in this case, more sugars have been able to kind of burn off, right? They've the plant's been able to utilize that. So therefore,
have you had the opportunity to experience the same cultivar air dried and freeze dried, and experienced and gone, clearly prefer the air dried resin to the freeze dried resin?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a good question. What if I actually freeze dried and put one on one? Yeah, I mean, of course, yeah, 100%. Yeah, like, so they're different experiences. You're going to keep a mono and sesquiterpene profile in the majority of your freeze dried hash, depending on when it was pulled. On the lather of that, you're stuck with a very subset of chemical profiles that are, in some cases been burned off because they're alcohols, and in other cases they are washed away in the water, right? And they're just not present. So it's where you get this aged hash taste, or like as we often hear from the youngins, the swag terp. It has that specific pinene kind of myrcene vibe to it, right? Mm-hmm. It's because a lot of those volatiles are just gone. So I think
oxidized. Yeah,
they're oxidized, exactly. And some people can call that degradation. Some people call that just a chemical reaction and change. To whatever, yeah. So Addison hates it. I don't. It depends on the varietal. Like, if an Afghani that has has a really spicy kind of vibe to it, air dry that all day long, because it'll only bring out more of a traditional hash vibe in it, right? And it has that.
But you wouldn't dab that. You would smoke that in.
No, not at all. I would never.
That's
dab
the
that.
difference. It's
never.
that swag terp, whatever it is. It's that would that even be considered hashaline, or what the fuck ever it is? It's
hashishene.
Hashishene.
Yeah, I mean,
would that be hashishene?
Hashaline is way better, by the way.
But I mean,
hashaline is way better.
It's all freeze drying material. So even this idea of traditional hash, I think you have to, at least my point of view, and you can all tell me I'm wrong, but I feel like if you really want a traditional hash, you have to air dry your material, and you have to bounce it on a screen, and you have to roll it and hand roll it, and go through the farmer's grade down to your fine sift, and then hand roll those, and that's your real quote unquote traditional. So using a freeze dryer is great. It's really helpful. It's just it's a contemporary way of getting to a very similar place, and you're retaining all of the things that would not be retained in a traditional hash. So I want to just call that.
But it's safer, right? Because it's going to be free of it's going to be free of aspergillus, fusarium. any of the Aspergillus and Fusarium will be completely removed in the freeze drying process.
100%.
And the terps are more protected. Like, dude, I didn't really, and people will try to bust my balls for this, but if anyone notices, I didn't really get into the solventless thing until the freeze dryers came around. Because before that, I was like, oh, I'm at the lab level and I see how much fucking Fusarium, I see how much shit is in this air dried hash, and it's just inferior, you know, and it wasn't really there yet. And then once they came along and you were able to really make safer hash and produce a much safer product, like Aspergillus and Fusarium, they sporulate with heat. So if you burn them, they just sporulate like a motherfucker and get into the lung cavity and give you aspergillosis. That's like, and that's real shit for somebody with an immune compromise or a compromised immune system. That 100%. Could be, you know, could be like a cancer patient or somebody or whatever. So I always saw it from that point of view. And once the you know, the other methodology came out, it really sped everything along. And now it's just like there's no turning back. Now it's
no,
amazing.
100%.
I smoke one in the pipe and combust it, and then I smoke the other way, I guess, which is
exactly. I mean, you can still do traditional air dried hash and retain some incredible profiles. It just requires a lot of surface area, a lot of work, and the right tools in the right environment. It's just really hard. To your point, it's why we've all moved away from it. It's just at scale, it is impossible to air dry without getting asparagus and aspergillus, and it's just all of it is it's real. Your bacterial levels are just too high. It's just too there's too much that can go wrong.
And those are little micro beasties and all this shit that needs to be in the grow room, that lives in the grow room, but then needs to go away.
As soon as it's why organic gardening and air dried hash is extremely hard. I mean, dude, I can't tell you, if you're using foliar, good luck. I'll tell you right now.
Yeah.
If you're foliar spraying and you're trying to do air dry, man, or even freeze dry, I'd just be really careful. Like, you know, even like 2 weeks in, like I would just be really careful. Like,
maybe that's why some of these hash dudes look so sick. I never thought of it. Maybe this is why. I never thought of this. We should get some rapid tests at these sessions and fucking see how many of these boys are toxic. That's the fucking
toxic aspergillus tests.
Yes, Fusarium, the Fusarium boys.
Yeah, I mean, so through that time, I mean, that's why exactly, like being so in it, you see so much, and that's why the moment I knew we could freeze dry was the moment it just was never looking back. And that's why when people ask me, like, why don't you do dry cure material anymore? It's like, I just don't have a place for it. There's no reason. I don't have a reason for it. I don't really, it just give me a good reason for it, and I'd try it.
Show me a market for it.
Yeah. Show me. And then on top of that, show me material that wasn't dried in 2 weeks. You know, like we're just in a different world now. It's why most of the cannabis on the shelf is really difficult to swallow sometimes, and the terp profiles are just gone. So they're drying them in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and they're in jars. And then jars, as you know, have headroom and
headroom.
Yeah.
So for the people watching who are trying to fight the good fight and do the right thing, and are operating in the legal space and are using a freeze dryer to dry their hash and then produce a traditional product, what do you advise they denote or say to differentiate themselves from is it freeze dried traditional water hash? Is that what you would?
Yeah, I just think we need to start to call out what these things are. We're now getting into a new vernacular when we're talking about these new tools, right? And they're inherently different products, like by design. Chemically, they are different products, right? So that's one thing I think it would be great if we just figure out what the right buckets are for this. And then we just leave it at that, and it's just that's what it is. And you know,
it's all hash.
There's no shade on any of this. I just want to say that.
No, absolutely not.
Understanding so when we interact with one another and talk about these topics, we have some sort of common ground that we can agree upon in terms of terminology. Because I'll definitely admit that it's hard. It's been hard sometimes to be like, someone's like, yeah, I have full melt, and it's like, well, what's defining your full melt, right? And what is the star system? What is I sit here with the full melt hat and the 6-star in the back of it. Like what are we agreeing on, right? I think that's another thing.
It's a tough system. It's because everybody's definition of what 6-star is slightly different. I know some guys, it's no Q-tip, it's water that disappears, no Q-tip, and I'm like, I don't know if that's that.
That's not a thing, though. You have the fibrous mat. I mean, if you don't have the fibrous mat, do you have hash? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So
the way I've always seen it is, do you have it? If you have it, it's not 6-star. because 6-star is 6-star is like 6-star is almost 7-star as far as I'm concerned. Like, it's, do you have some? And then they're like, well, I have this, and then you're like, you don't have 6-star. That's always like how it goes. And 6-star is like, you don't bring it with you. It's fucking, you have to like come to my house. Like, it's the real shit.
It's 100%. Like, it's really difficult.
Because the way I see it, like, to me, 6-star is, okay, I can tell a change in this product, in the environment that I'm in the time that I've had it, and I've had to control its ability to continue to nucleate and change, because it's so pure that it went from, oh wow, and it just keeps going, and it's like, and then when you finish the dab, the Q-tip is gold. There's no darkness because nothing was overheated, and all these things. That's 6-star. When you put it in the parchment with your fingers and you put it together, and it's just myrcene, just fucking gold. That's 6-star. There's no particulate. There's nothing in it other than liquid. It's just this liquid that it just wants to go back. And then even too, what I find too is with true 6-star, you can reheat true 6-star. There's something about that, the way, I don't know, and I've always been able to do it. You just reheat it,
and it also has a higher thermal retention rate as well. Like, you can
it's
hit
pure.
it hotter for sure.
Yeah.
And then you can rehit it again, to your point. 100%. I find that most hash has some debris, no matter what.
Yeah.
There's always some debris. Now, is it burnt?
Heads.
No. Yeah. It has to have some tiny little bit.
But my favorite stuff, like notable dabs where I'm like, ooh, I'll then inspect and I'll look. There's times when I look and it's like heads, fucking murky water. It's not perfect.
Yeah,
when you look
100%.
at visually what you see in the banger, but to me, true 6-star, the full melt, the craziest shit, it's really rare. It's really rare.
How often does that happen, Addison? How often does that happen? Like, where you have something that's an incredible melt on all other factors of grading, but really not impressive.
Quite often, honestly. Like, I'll be honest. Like, there's, we're lucky to get to look at a lot of different stuff, and 710 will send us their pheno packs and just cool shit like that we get to see. And quite often, honestly, like when you get pulled in and you get to see the selection of the pheno selection of the finished product, when they're kind of figuring things out, whether it's 710 or Papa Select or even friends or other guys, quite often actually, that it's not beautiful, it's not perfect, but on the palate and the flavor and the taste, good fucking Lord. And I think it might also be psychological, because typically a lot of the time these are new things that haven't been fucked with yet. So you're kind of like, oh, and then, and then you have to actually, what'll happen is time will go by and then you have to dig deep and remember that initial experience with it. But quite often, actually, like that I found even in some of the pheno hunts, like the selection stuff that I just did. And that's why I say it, is because the other day I think it was like the Sugar Shack or something like that.
Great variety.
And I looked in it and I was like, oh my God. And it was like, I could see heads and everything else, but the taste of it, the one that I liked the most, it had like almost a brown sugar kind of kind of a flavor to it, and it was so like mapley kind of flavored. Like the smell was like, I don't know. I mean, that was a nice selection. That was good, but yeah, it happens, and it's not perfect. It's nature, so it's not gonna be perfect. And if you
100%,
and you know
dude.
if
I
yeah, if
can't
you're
tell
looking for
you.
that, then just buy BHO. You know.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've pheno hunted like orange varietals to find nothing worth keeping. Like
Yeah.
the most insane taste, beautiful, beautiful taste profiles, but the resin just not good.
Yeah.
Just really hard. So I think, you know, pheno hunts I think are just one of those things where you have to really be very objective, and it's you know, to your point, it's interesting seeing the nuance of a singular varietal across different washes. Yeah.
So, Collin, if you're strictly making medicine for your head, are you pulling your melt out, or are you pressing your melt into rosin?
Well, both, because rosin travels easier than melt, and melt is just easier to make and have around.
Do you have
Yeah.
do you have varietals that you clearly like the rosin or the melt significantly over the other?
Yeah, like all my lemon varietals, I actually like the hash better. I think the hash is much like more profound and more. It's like sharper as a palate profile. And when you press it, it gets a. I mean, it's still great. It loses the D-limonene vibe, and then it gives them more gas forward. So some people would maybe argue based on your palate that you would like the rosin better in some of these lemon varietals versus, you know, like I have lemon brulee and lemon G on ice, and I pull from those batches sometimes that I have, and those distinctively are extremely different from one another in terms of their profile. But the lemon on the lemon brulee is a lot softer on the rosin than it is on the hash. The hash is like almost like a different plant. It's almost like a lemon G, to be honest, which is very, very like almost like kerosene lemon. If you guys know that one.
So you've had the ability and pleasure of working with a number of the commercial hash machines currently available on the market.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about your experiences with these machines and what you feel the advantages and potential disadvantages are?
Yeah, I mean, like none of these machines are perfect. I think there's a lot for us to keep exploring, and I encourage everyone to take note of that. That a bubble now machine with a wrap on it, the only disadvantage you have versus a larger machine like you know, the I can't remember the name of that machine, the Osprey, is the clean, you know, the ability to clean it and the ability to run it with RPM and understand that there's like a pattern that someone thought about and a vortexing of the water. But at the end of the day, they're not all that different from one another in terms of their design until you move away from bottom propeller driven machines, which are predominantly all based off of a single drive shaft motor. So, you know, doing it from the bottom is in my personal opinion is not the best way to wash material because of how rough it is on the actual biomass and how the RPMs have to ramp up. And during that ramp up period, it just tears through this stuff. And it's really, you know, it damages it's how you get dirty material quick. Even if you're doing a small or a short wash, which is, you know, 10, 15 minutes. So I would, you know, going through using all of these things and all this ideology, I think, you know, a paddle is always the best. And then the reason I like the Axis so much is because it's a top-down paddle design that incorporates basically like waveforms and an algorithm that you can create, and allows you to exactly produce to a point, to a fine T point, how you would paddle if you get into the machine. It can truly be an extension of yourself. You can go slow, you can go fast, you can add RPM, you can add ramp down times, you can add all of this stuff that allows you to focus on other parts of the process while that is being taken care of. And there's no one, it does it every single time, all the time, exactly how you told it to do it every time. It's just like an instrument to me. It's like a drum machine. That's how I look at it. Look like a large NPC, where I just like selected thoughtfully how this is going to go through the sequence, how this is how the song's going to roll. These are the samples. Here's the kick drum. Here's the snare. You know, it's like how I think about this stuff. So it's all, to me, it's an orchestration, and then you just run the setting, and that setting runs, and then you can change it per varietal, per run. You can go more time, less time. You can stop it. You can start it. You could take the paddle out and hand wash the rest. You could do whatever you want. And then it's not just like the Osprey and all these other ones are like a single basin, right? And I think that in like from afar, you're like, yeah, that's how you do it. Sure. But when you can have like 8 or 9 65 gallons all in a sink and like a rotation, and it's what I consider modular, like a modular instrument, you're intentionally picking and choosing things to be more efficient, and you can get through more material faster, and it's a better machine.
Yeah, different tool for, you know, different objectives, right? I think that's,
yeah, I mean, it's all this, to me, it's all the same adjustment. Be as gentle as you can and get as much as you can at once, and treat the material as it needs to be treated individually, just like you are hand paddling. So to me, it's hand paddling or the access at scale. That's it. That's how I like to do things. I find it took me a long time to get comfortable with it, but I think it's once you get through that, you start to realize that it's actually like really makes you better at what you're doing. It makes you focus on things that you weren't focusing on before. Just gives you more time.
I mean, there's different approaches. There's like surgical, then there's field craft. Like the two different, there could be two different approaches to the same thing. But.
I think that it just like that machine falls in between like surgical and craft to me in a way that nothing else to date has done.
Nice. I wanted to ask you about, we're seeing a renaissance around static sifting, and recently we've seen more and more talk in the community about static sifting, utilizing either a gloved or a bare hand. Can you talk about this technique and how this technique more than likely dates back to Mr. Dave Watson?
Yeah, and I would think like maybe Marcus or somebody we were chatting about, it dates even further back. I think, it dates back to like, the very beginning and other individuals. And that's where I think this information was passed on to individuals like David, who is, makes phenomenal dry sift. I think dry sift is it's one of those things. It's just like the surface area we were talking about with drying material. It's really hard to do at scale, and getting that stuff done at scale sometimes has been proven to be difficult, not only from just a production standpoint, but what Addison dropped earlier was like something that I don't think is talked about enough is the microbial counts on some of this stuff. It just gets so high when you condense down flour, those particulates, no matter how clean it is, it could be heavy metals for all we know, and it's just locked in the heads. You know what I mean? It's like, cadmium, whatever it is, you know what I mean? So there's a lot to think about there, but I think that technique is really valuable. I want everyone out there, if you don't make dry sift, make dry sift. You should learn how to make dry sift. If you're a hash maker that has not made dry sift, that's something you should be focusing on, so you can understand where your craft came from and where your roots of all of this actually were born.
Would it be safe to say? Would it be safe to say that dry sift is 6-star?
done extremely well. But again, there's levels to it. There's levels to the game. There's not just hash, right? There's levels to the hash. That's why we have the system, right? So I would argue that, well, yeah, 6-star proper melt. Yeah, it's like the originator it's the original 6-star, but I think there's levels to it. I wouldn't blanket it, as I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Well, technically it would be, because it's all just separation.
100%. Got it.
So like Russian teacup, like you fucking,
the Russian.
There's always eventually one cup, you know, it goes down to, and I think in that world, I think it is fucking that, what's the measurement that's like the lowest measurement? I can't remember what it is right now.
In terms of what?
Picograms.
Picograms?
Picogram.
Well, yeah,
Fucking
I mean,
picogram.
the dry static method is, you know, you can do it. I mean, we were doing it with like DVDs because the outside of it had that plastic wrap, and then we found out you could do it on big rolls, and then just like put a piece of plastic on the roll, and then put parchment on that, and then clip it, and then you could roll it across a huge surface area and grab it on the roll, right? So there's a lot of ways to do it, and then there's like other cats that are out there using static wands. Like I've used a static wand. I mean, it's not the biggest yield, but you can make some really, really clean, super clean material. I mean, you're like really nice. But again, these are super small amounts, guys. Like this is like head stash kind of stuff. Not even like thousands of grams, you know, not even like a couple 100 grams. You know what I mean? So
do you see a feasibility in the ability to scale up either like ultrasonic vibrational or static sifting, or do you think that
100%. I think that's totally scalable. It's just you have to have the right equipment in place. I mean, it's all possible for sure. Yeah, 100%. In fact, I would go as far as to say it exists. It already does exist. Like it's already happening. Let's put it that way. So I think the use of sound waves and you know, sonic technology that's been studied for the past at least 6 years for sure, like heavily. There's equipment coming, I believe, that will change where we're at, and especially with dry sift.
So where do you see the future of extraction over the next 5 years? Do you see a lot of innovation taking place, or do you see more of a honing of the current technologies?
I think there's some new things that are going to bubble to the surface, especially for like vape technology. I think we're going to get away from seeing some of the stuff made with, you know, water hash and then rosin, and then I think the idea of that many touch points in process is, sure, you make an okay product, but there's several different ways to get there faster, cheaper. You know, especially if your end goal is to ultimately make oil out of it, it's a pretty long way to go to get there. You know what I mean? There's smarter ways, I think. So I think I will say that I do believe that that's kind of a new iteration that will come.
You're saying from like dry hash to liquid?
Yeah, like if you're trying to make an oil, it's a lot of steps and a lot of time and a lot of manpower to get to that place that ultimately you're kind of not destroying, but you're changing so much that it's a roundabout.
Well, it's like time, heat, pressure.
Yeah, but like,
I mean, if anyone didn't know that, that's fucking, that's the secret. Like,
100%.
You know?
But yeah, exactly. And I, you know, and it's, you can get there faster using that ideology, right? I guess that's what I'm trying to explain. So
yeah,
that's one thing that I do believe that's coming. And I think more solventless products are on the rise. I think more people are starting to get, I feel like we finally won with solventless in a way. Like we finally have the place that we were supposed to be in 2010 in my eyes. Like we were already supposed to be here. Like what happened? You know, so, but we're here, and I think that the individuals and the new individuals that are excited about this medium, I'm excited to see what they do with it. You know, I'm always looking around to see who's thinking about something new, because I love just like traditional, doing this in a traditional sense, right? But I also love the idea of someone being like, there's more to this than just like what I see now, you know? So I would love to see individuals cross, you know, like have cross complementary kind of disciplines that come to this medium and bring like a new take on it. Like, I can't even put a finger on what it is though, to be honest. It's just like, what's the new and how, who's thinking that far outside the box that it's going to in time, you know, influence a wave of creators, you know?
Well, it's like you have all these inputs that go into the production of the material, and that's gotten more and more natural with living soil and no-till and all these other great things that have gone in.
100%.
Regenerative cannabis cultivation on that side. And then ever quickly, you continue to see that on the production side. We have, of course, the base of, you know, barrels and ice and paddles and all that, all the way into, you know, the different equipment and things that are there, all the way from, you know, ice and water touch to secondary process to you know, third process to, you know, it's like it's all over the place. I think the next revolution that we're going to see is genetically. I think that's kind of where the most room is for things to come in, and I think it's going to happen in just the source material that people get, because the more production that you get that's mixed light greenhouse, the closer the quality that you can get to actual indoor product. And that's really, I hate to say it, I mean, I love outdoor hash, it's great, but there's a lot of particulate a lot of times because it's exposed to the environment so much. So
100%.
what I
It's
mean
honestly
about mixed
why
light,
I don't even wash outdoor anymore, like at all. It's been
it's tough. I mean,
probably
it's
10
one thing, it's a
years,
different
10,
kind of
15,
hash,
10,
but
12 years, honestly. Like it
yeah.
just don't, there's not a place for it in our like offerings for what we do. It just doesn't make sense. It's too dirty to clean up. I can't recirculate water. I can't do any of the things that I like to do. You know, and you know, like it's, yeah, I think that's well said. The things that in the future individuals are going to be focusing on, I think largely have to do with the quality of the resin. And the quality of the resin is going to dictate what's possible. Because, I don't know, man, if there's like Wi-Fi mints, like if you've ever or like Wi-Fi OG, like if you've ever grown that or washed that, it's like sap. It's super difficult to work with, right? But it's super popular, right? So we've got to weed out certain things out of our like toolkit. And that's the other thing. Like I look at genetics as like kind of those are tools. Like those are straight up tools for you to utilize, and why I've kept what I've kept for the reasons I kept them, because they're tools. Like they produce certain profiles. I've grown out a million different seeds to try to get those same profiles before, and none of them perform the same. And it's exactly what you need to continue doing the things you do. Because hash making, I can't imagine trying to start a company now and not knowing the things I know. It would be a mountain, you know. It's
so
just,
disenchanted.
It just sounds so disinflating. You know what I mean? Like I'm just like, oh my gosh. But
so bad.
But we do today. What's going for us today is we have more varietals than we've ever had in existence that wash super well, taste really great, and are like in the 5-6% range. I mean, everything I'm washing in California is great yield. Like I'm super impressed with the yields. It's crazy.
And that's the game of hash, honestly. Like if you want to play the game of hash, of solventless hash, and you want to win, you need yield.
100%, man.
I don't care what anyone fucking says. And people want to, oh, well, I mean, I got a 1.8er that's just fire
like,
terps. It's
the
like,
terps,
dude, that's not
this and
viable.
that. Like,
yeah,
there's
that's
a
not
reason
viable.
why this red Congo that I have only stays in my pocket. It's just like, what do you? Doesn't do anybody any good. It's like weekend warrior thing that you do when you're a home grower, for real. And that's
some things are so rare. You know?
Yeah, I would love more people to get more setups again, kind of, and bring it back to the old school days where you're making things yourself, you know. And I think there's something to that.
Well, maybe that's what people need to do. I mean, maybe that's what the advice that we need to give people when they ask us is that, you know what, get a tent, get some seeds, start on the ground fucking level, and flatten your head on that wall in front of you until you get to that point of understanding, and use all the tools, because the curve of learning is going to be quicker now because of YouTube and this other shit. So what took a lot of guys 20 fucking years to learn, someone could literally download like the Matrix into their brain through fucking YouTube in 3 days. Like, that's just the reality that we live in now. But it you know, and it is what it is. It's there. But I think the most room for the next thing to come into the hash world is through genetics. It's going to be, you know, some sort of interesting thing. But that's just a short game. The ball doesn't move very far in that world in comparison to what I think is, like, you know, how far we came from through BHO into, you know, using the equipment, the finishing equipment that's in solventless now to make it safer. That's kind of led to these things. But
honestly, I think it's important to call it. It's like nothing's really changed all that much from the ideology of the bubble now from Marcus. Like, if I'm really straight about that, like, yeah, you got stainless steel, you got top loader, you got what Pure Pressure has been doing, and we've been I think Pure Pressure to me is a good example of what's great, and I think there's other companies like that are changing the game, but it's all predominantly based on that same ideology of what Mila's and Marcus and even Reinhardt dealt. Like, I think that's important to call out, is like what Reinhardt created is still predominantly the paradigm we live in today. Is you know, as fast and big as the machines get, still this predominantly the same. I mean, I've used stainless steel screens. They don't perform all that much better at all. Like, in fact, I would argue that they come apart faster, you know? So, yeah, I think there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on, but there's, I'm excited to see the equipment that's coming out to Washington actually next month or in July.
I'm excited for that. That'll be cool.
That's the kind of innovation, the things that I like to, that gets me excited, man. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. Yeah. Like 2 paddles.
I almost can't believe they're sending it to us to use. Like, that's what I'm just like,
incredible.
Wow. Yes.
Big shout out to the guys up at Hashtag that Alex has been great to work with, and they see the value in what we're doing at Melting of the Heads, and so it's going to be a lot of fun to put the machine through its paces. And I mean, says a lot about the confidence of the company to be able to take it out and say, hey, yeah, go for it. So I too am very excited. I think it's going to be a really cool experience, and, you know, an opportunity for a lot of makers to see the machine that otherwise we would not have. I wanted to switch it up a little bit and touch on something that you've been alluding to and has clearly been a part of your life since a very early age, which is your music. Can you talk a little bit about you know, those two worlds and how you find balance between music and cannabis, and what each of those, or what music, how music has existed with cannabis throughout all these years?
Yeah, man. I mean, so music was always you know, that's what I did for a living, you know. I was a sound designer. I did spots for like Viacom, MTV. They'd send me animations, and I'd make literally like beats and interlude music for them, and did sound design for like a lot of different projects, and then ultimately getting in the studio and working with other artists and collaborating visually. And that's how I met Machine Drum. Travis Stewart's a dear friend of mine, and we became super tight. And we, you know, kind of came up together. Like, he's a homie, and we lived together for a long time and grew. And you know, as artists, we just found a lot of common ground, and that kind of spilled over into developing Theophilus London. And, you know, Theo was a part of our whole New York world for a long time, if anyone knows who Theophilus London is, and kind of brought him up as a young kind of hip hop artist and in Brooklyn. And that spilled over into cannabis, and music was in cannabis or symbiotic, you know. And it's just the way it was. It was cannabis and music have been a part of me, and now through all that, I get to, you know, I get to work with other artists and get to kind of get in the studio with them and be kind of the Swiss Army knife, you know. So it's been cool. It's been a good experience. And yeah, I used to do music videos for Machine Drum and other artists as well. So I was a director for a little while, and you know, again, these are just like, it's just a part of it all, you know. It's like, these are things that, you know, you just do. It's
so cool, man. I mean, it's just something,
you know,
that probably not a lot of people that know you for cannabis know about. And I think that that's a cool part of your story. You're doing an incredibly cool project with plants in the studio.
Oh yeah. So I've been working on an ambient record where I hook sensors up to the plant, to actual specific varietals, and each plant has control voltage, like it gives control voltage out. So then I'll hook that up to instruments and then orchestrate those instruments to do certain notations and have certain beats that go with it. So I've been working on this record and compiling all these varietals to make a master list of a ambient record that I'm calling Plant Waves. And it's just like this, it's a long form project. I've been doing it for like, I don't know, 2.5 years now. There's a device that a friend of mine developed that basically has like these pads that go out, and I just hook it onto the plant. And I've been playing with that for a couple of years. And yeah, and just like, that's been a big part of my life, and touring and playing with New Villager, and you know, we did quite a lot, but it was all, you know, all intermixed. Like we needed a way to, music's a tough world, you know. It's not easy. Even being signed to bands and or signed to labels, I'm sorry, you know, and having all the support in the world like I did, it's super hard, man, you know. Being you know, so yeah, we worked with like I Am Sound Records, and I released music with Mood Gadget and Ghostly International, and yeah, it was, you know, I Am Sound was a part of Columbia Records. So
are you working on any other projects other than the plant
not right
sound?
now, man. I'm just focusing on these projects with Kevin and growing more and just like breeding more varietals right now. And I've really turned on towards like the horticultural side of things now, and like I'm focusing back in on that right now. And that's where Best Friend Farms and I are actually working on a breeding collaboration project. He's a Dempure farmer in Maine, and him and I have come to an agreement, and we're going to make some offspring together. He's got some incredible hash makers, and I've got some incredible pollen, and I think there's going to be you know, some good offspring. We've got to test all of that. We've got a way to go, but I think that'll be cool.
That's awesome, man. The overall North American cannabis market is in a pretty tough spot right now. I know there's probably a few small exceptions in certain small 100%. Pockets, but you know, in the next 3 years, are you overall optimistic, or do you feel as though it's going to be continue to be tough for the foreseeable future?
I mean, crystal ball wise, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I think just from what I'm seeing, we really need a body that can come together and govern how prices and pricing works, because we've lost control of the whole thing. It's from farming to distro to distribute to retail. To see an $85 eighth and see the farmer get none of this is bonkers to me. And I think we've lost complete control of this, and we have no real rhyme or reason for it, other than just that there's overproducing. Well, again, what does that really mean, and what are the parameters for that? Like, what is quality? Was it when it was harvested? Was it how long it was dried? Like the terp profile, the TAC, like what are these things in the conversation we need to bring into view so we can actually have a real meaningful conversation to help gain not just maybe control is the wrong word, but gain a better understanding of how we can be in control of our own destiny, because clearly we're not, if that makes sense. And I feel for everyone out there right now, because it's to grow high quality cannabis is expensive. It's not cheap. Like, I don't know what worlds everyone lives in to think that cannabis should be so cheap, but agriculturally, even making teas, if you're even foraging for that, someone has to have time to do that and get paid for that time, right? So how do we do those things? So anyway, I'm going down a rabbit hole, but like, my point is I feel like we need to have someone and something come together, work on these taxations, work on the way that it's supplied, work on how the pit stops and this whole thing are working. And I just feel bad for everyone because it's so out of control. Yeah.
What advice do you have for people that are looking to get in the industry? And it can be as simple as stay away. I mean, what true advice are you looking to give to individuals looking to come?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a big industry. I think Addison said it earlier. Like, you don't have to be like, when you look at what gets you excited about the industry, you don't have to be a hash maker. You don't have to be a grower. You don't have to be. In many cases, that's not even needed. Until you get to like real scale, and then that's even like broken down. When you start to see how big projects work, it's so many departments all firing off together, and we're all part of the hand, right? I think the Dead said it best. We're a hand picking up an object together, right? And we all have to have the dexterity and we have to be there together to do that, to pick the object up. And that's what a great accountant does, a great CFO and a great CEO and a great COO, and all of these great individuals coming together, and it's why I feel excited to be where I'm at with PAX, is because I get to focus on what I love, is making things, right? And I encourage everyone to find that thing that's exciting and try not to do too much. Again, I've been the guy who has to do it all, and it's wearing. It's not even exciting at that point. So I don't envy the individuals that have to do it all. Find what you love and just focus on it. And it does not have to be touching the plant. It can be something that helps someone touch the plant in a way that elevates their knowledge to them to spend more time touching the plant, right? And that's the kind of stuff I think we need in this industry today, is more minds that are willing to be egoless, if that's a thing, and work together as a team, because we all don't know everything and we all need support.
Well, there's no better way to find what it is that you're best at than doing it all.
Sure.
And then you're
that's
like,
a good point.
Fuck all this. Fuck 100%. All of this stuff.
That's kind of what I've learned over the past 2 years, my friend. I think that's a good takeaway from what I've learned in it. It changed me as a human. Like, I had to really repair myself and I want to say this out loud. It's like, I had to repair myself from that experience and really move forward with the ideology that there's a purpose here that's greater, that I was being distracted from, right? And that's, you have to kind of let go of the things that you think you're so right on, and you're not all, you have so much to learn. So it's I think that's the best advice I can give for everyone, is like, bring what you love to the table, which is passion, because you can't teach that. Like, no one can teach you the passion. I can teach you how to grow a plant, teach you how to wash resin. I can teach you how to do a lot of things, but if you don't come to the table with that passion, ready every day to like pivot, and not really pivot, but like to be challenged and to have to change the way you thought something should go, maybe it's the wrong industry for you, right? Yeah. But if you're here and you're like, all right, today I'm ready to just do it, and like all this stuff goes wrong and you fix it and you move on, and that doesn't faze you, you're in the right spot.
Yeah.
I think that's great advice, man. Collin, I appreciate your time, man. If people want to reach you, where's the best place to get at you?
Vessel Life Science on IG, at Vessel Life Science, and we have a website that we're going to be doing a merch section and educational and also a product section that will kind of go over all the stuff that we've created and things that we're doing. So that'll change over the next like 4 weeks. So keep an eye on out for that.
Awesome, man. Well, we appreciate your time, and we'd love to have you back, man. We really appreciate you taking the time on a Sunday.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Bring that sour garlic to California.
Addison's not gonna let you forget about that. Awesome. You have a great day, man. Thank you, everybody.
Later, guys.
Don't forget to like and
Thank
subscribe.
you. Peace, man. Thank you.